to you by ELITEFTS.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help ELITEFTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, ELITEFTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the ELITEFTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Americ Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americhealth.com/tabletalk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americhealth.com/tabletalk. The discount code is tabletalk. Today's episode is brought to you by Power Rack Strength CBD. Power Rack Strength was founded by Brian Carroll, a good friend of mine. I've been thrown many products over the years, literally thrown many products over the years, which was all junk. So of course I was going to bust Brian a little bit when he first came out with this, until he explained to me how much research and who his partners were that were associated with his company. Then after he sent me some of the samples to test, I was absolutely blown away by the drops. As with most people, I have a hard time falling asleep. I'm cool when I'm asleep, but I have a hard time falling asleep. These were the only thing that actually helped me out of all the different things that I've tried in the past. It definitely makes a difference in my training. So check out PowerRackStrengthCBD.com. Use the code TableTalk2023 and you'll receive 35% off your first order. If I'm pushing anything, I'm pushing the drops first, then I will push the roller second. The balm is good, but I'm just not a balm guy. What's up, guys? We are back with another edition of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Scott McNally. He is a veteran in the bodybuilding world, having close to 15 years of podcasting. Is that right? Or is it 15? No, 15 years in the industry, close to 1,000 episodes.
Over 1,000?
Over 1,000 episodes of podcasting. Currently have Think Big. I'm going to say it's a network, right? It Absolutely. Is a channel, but it's more of a network because you have multiple shows going on there at the same time. Yeah. You had me on one of the shows.
Yep, Blood, Sweat, and Gear.
Blood, Sweat, and Gear a little bit ago. And we got talking a little bit during that show and off of the show about your story and just some other things that we had in common, some roads that we kind of crossed in different areas, bodybuilding and powerlifting, that I thought it would be great to have you on, especially to tell your story, as well as to expose you to a little bit bigger, right? To a little bit bigger market for what you're doing, because it's the mission of our company is live, learn, and to pass on, and you've been doing that for 15 years in a different industry, and that's commendable, especially coming from somebody that's been in industry for 25 years, to know the other side of all that most people don't see, where you don't get thanked enough for the work that you put out, so this way at least I can have you sit down and thank you for all the work that you put out there, because I know what it's like on that other side. You see mostly criticism and not really, hey, what you're doing makes a difference and is helping people. So I want to commend you on that, right? Because it doesn't happen enough from there. But the where I want to start with is, I'm actually going to go back a little bit deeper, right? Listening through, stalking you, I'm just be honest, right? Just so stalking you over the last couple days. You did start dabbling with weight training when you were 14 or 15.
Yeah.
As a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
What started that?
You know what, well, first, I do want to say thank you, first of all, for having me here, man. And this is a huge, huge honor to me. So I want to say that. I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching at home right now. You know, this is freaking cool. So I have to say thank you, first of all. But, you know, my parents were both into exercise, and neither of them were competitors. But they both went to the gym all the time. And this was back in the early 80s. And the guy who ran the gym, his name was Lauren. He was a huge Arnold fan. He was like a Lebanese version of Arnold, kind of. Yeah. He walked around with his lats flared out all the time. Always had these like skin tight pants on with a tank top, and would always
the spandex pants, right?
No, this is like earlier. This is like earlier
before
80s.
that.
So they might have been like polyester slacks sometimes. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
and then he'd either wear no shoes or he would wear flip flops in the wintertime in Michigan.
Yeah.
But he was a bodybuilder, and he brought over Pumping Iron, the videotape. And my dad had a VCR at the time, because like this is the age not everybody had a VCR.
Yeah.
And so the guys all came over and they all watched Pumping Iron, and I watched that. And you know, there's so many people that are like, "Oh, Pumping Iron got me started." But you know, I saw that movie, and I saw the guys at the gym, because I would go to the gym with my dad, and I'd just hang out in the side, you know. And it was a cool old gym, lots of chalk. Back then, nobody wore like name brand clothes to work out in. They wore like the same clothes that you would change your oil in, you would then wear to the gym, because that was your junky clothes, you know. And they were probably not as big as I remember them, because I was just little, you know. Like, but they were monsters to me, and I just remember like the weights crashing and the chalk and everything else, and it just felt natural. And so by the time I was about 12, I started dusting off the parents' old weight set that was under the stairs and started teaching myself. And then from there, my dad and his friends started showing me stuff. And then by the time I was about maybe like 14, I was at a point where I was able to help the other kids in my neighborhood. And by then my dad had bought me some steel plates and like a nicer Joe Weider bench and stuff. And I had a pretty good hookup. Even had some like hexagon dumbbells. I saved money, and I still have some of these hex dumbbells. There's a couple dumbbells that have the price tag still on them from like Dunham Sporting Goods or something. Yeah. And there's like a 35 pounder that says like $17. It's like, I remember saving from like a part-time job to get those though. So yeah, that's when I got started. But I really shifted gears for a long time. And it wasn't until I was closer to my 30s that I really plugged back into that.
You shifted, if I understand correctly, so you did it for a couple of years, then you got away from it, then you came back when you were around 19.
Yeah, and I had gotten clean for the first time. So I had
19.
Yeah.
So when did you start using?
Like probably about 15, 16, 15.
And what was
16.
the drug of choice at that point?
At that point, you know, just the basic stuff that kids did, you know, drinking, smoking weed, maybe acid, then selling acid, stuff like that, mushrooms, all those things. It didn't get really hard until I got a little bit older, until I was like maybe 19, 20. And then it got harder, and then at that point I did have to go to rehab, and I got clean. And I wasn't in a recovery program or anything, but I went back to lifting. And that lasted a good year, and then it just kind of faded away. But it was a good year, and I started jogging. I remember that.
Now, was that a year clean though, or was it a year just still kind of dabbling?
It was like a year of not being miserable, but it definitely wasn't in recovery. I can tell you that much, you know. But I wasn't like seeking it out, you know. So, but it really wasn't something that I really got into until after I got like clean, till I actually changed a lot of things about my life. And that was 2005 is when I first tried.
All right, so you got 15 years.
Yeah, so there's a long period. Yeah,
in there, and your background's photography. are, you know, so you're learning those skill sets while being an addict, correct?
Yeah, and it's not that I spent my entire life using drugs. You know, like that whole 15 years wasn't just like me getting stoned or high or whatever. You know, there were periods of time that things would fall off and I'd pull it back together. And I had a tendency of doing really well in life and then falling apart and then rebuilding and then doing really well again. And I had a good few periods in there that I did pretty all right, but by the end there, like if I hadn't stopped, it got bad. It got
those all right periods, were they clean periods or was it?
It just wasn't matter. It didn't matter. Like because to me, here's the thing: is like. Clean isn't just like recovery to me isn't just the not using drugs. It's changing. I had to end up changing a lot of things about my personality. Like I had to reach down deep and look at just the way I lived my life. And it's kind of hard to explain some of that stuff, but it really was just the way that I lived my life that needed to completely be shifted. The way I looked at things, the way I treated people, the way I treated myself. You know, the way I see it is that in addiction is just the root of it is selfishness, and recovery to me is the opposite of that. So there were periods of time that maybe I wasn't using drugs, but it doesn't mean I wasn't still just a selfish person. You know, it doesn't mean that I wasn't it doesn't mean that I had the emotional maturity to deal with life. You know, there were skills I think that I had never really developed because I would cope by running. You know, and maybe it would be with a drug, maybe it would be with a hobby, maybe it would be with bodybuilding. You know, it's like I wouldn't really ever face what the problems were. I would just try to find something else to replace that, something else to outside of myself to make me feel better, I guess is the way I'd put it. And it took actually getting to the point when I was about 30 that I said, okay, now I really need to stop and look at this because, you know, I'm not going to make it in this world much longer.
So there was a good chunk of time that you were taking bodybuilding seriously and still battling that. Well,
no, because it was just to break it down. You know, I got into training when I was a kid, and then I, pretty much got away from it. Though I did get into it a little bit around 19 for a year, and then I really didn't do any of that until I got clean. And it was.
And that's 2007.
Well, actually, it was 2005 when I made the decision, and that's when I started lifting. Okay. And there was a 2-year period where I wouldn't say I was clean, but I hadn't changed yet, and I was trying to use bodybuilding really as my new drug for about 2 years.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying. Okay, that's where I was trying to go.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that's not just one thing replacing the other?
Yeah, and that's really what it was at the time. Like, I know that it was. Like, I needed the gym then. Like, I needed the gym. I needed to stay on track with my meals. Like, it was the most important thing in my life. And I like, you want to go to Christmas dinner? Okay, but I got to have my meals with. Like, I was that strict, constantly. And there comes a point that you can't do that forever, that's not going to last forever. There comes a point when I hurt myself badly and had to go to the hospital. And I took a shot of Dilaudid, which the doctor was like, hey, you're a big guy, you're going to probably need more drugs than most people. And the interesting thing is so I went to rehab, right? And then I get out and I start lifting, and I started using gear pretty early on in that phase, and I made a lot of progress. And I got to a point that I thought I had changed, because if I walked into a store and I was bigger than anybody else in that store. I'm not big like you guys are here at ELITEFTS. This is a different big, but I was bigger than your average person, right? And I felt like a different human being, and the reality is I was just that same skinny kid that never learned how to deal with his emotions. So the minute I took that shot, I was like, oh yeah, this is great, Well,
without mentioning any programs, because I don't think you're allowed to mention any programs, if you're in group settings, say, for instance, let's just say NA as an example, right? So you're there, and then they see you, and they know that you're using anabolics, how is that not still using in their mind if you're in that group setting?
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So in that 2-year period of time before I really got clean, I wasn't going to meetings.
Okay.
I was just like white knuckling it.
Okay.
So they had nothing to do with like actually
But
being
what about in your
recovery.
own mind though?
Well, that comes a little bit later, because then in 2007, it's like I realized, because here was the thing, is that from that period when I made that decision to get clean in 2005, I still wasn't really, I guess, ready. Like, what they say, somebody said this to me once, that there is a difference between desire and willingness. And you can have the desire to do something, you can have the desire to change, but having the willingness to actually follow through. Like, I had the desire as of 2005, but it wasn't until 2007 that I actually think I found the willingness to make that difference, because I saw myself what I was doing. Like, I saw how my actions would hurt the people that loved me. I saw how my life wasn't going to end up going anywhere if I didn't make any of these changes, and it hurt me to the core, to like hurt my family and to hurt the people that cared about me.
What made you see that? Because it was there before, but you didn't see it. So what do you think made you exposed to that?
I think that, I just, I think I wanted it. I just wasn't ready. 2005, I really wanted it, and I just wasn't ready yet. And it, I went to treatment, and I came out, and I wanted to do something different, and I wanted it so bad that I just forced myself into bodybuilding, and I thought that would be the way. And part of it was I really didn't want to change, I guess, like I didn't really want to have to admit that I was wrong, maybe, and admit that I had made mistakes, I guess. I don't know. It really was just like having to stop and step back, and even after I recognized it, it took me time, it still took me time, because when I got hurt, and I in 2000, it was about 2007, I got hurt, in that period of time, there was and I used, then I felt like,
well, you used, but when you say you used, was it the Dilaudid that you were prescribed after the?
That started with the Dilaudid, and
it started with that.
Yeah, it started with that, and then it went on, because then it was like, oh yeah, now I'm back off to the races again, and it was at that point, it was in 2007 then when I finally said, like, no, this is enough, and I was desperate. So I guess that I had the desire in 2005, but I was terrified by 2007, because we're talking like, using drugs during the day, we could call it an overdose, and then waking up and it being dark, and the first thought is, I can't remember the last time I used drugs, so I better use again so that I don't get sick, and then the same thing happens again, and then you just black out again, and having periods of time that I don't even remember, literally blacked out. So recognizing how close I really was to dying was freaking terrifying, terrifying. I feel like I felt myself leaving this earth. It's the best way I can put it. I felt like if there's a veil between us and the other side, I was crossing it, and it was a dark, dark place.
Yeah.
It took me getting to that spot that if I believe that I probably wouldn't have lasted another month, it would have been bad. So I was terrified enough in 2007 that I recognized I didn't have a choice.
Did you overdose before that?
All the time, like how bad at the various levels, It's
you see, the reason I'm asking that is because I know other addicts that have been damn near close to death in the ER, but they come out and they still use again.
Yeah,
so
I don't know, man. Then I never thought about that. I guess
what was different?
I guess it was worse. It was worse.
How's worse than, you know what I'm saying? Narcan's Narcan. How in your mind it was worse.
Yeah.
But maybe physically it wasn't as worse?
No, it was getting progressive.
Yeah,
the use was getting higher.
Got it.
The frequency was getting higher, all of that. And I could see myself not having many options left, like that. I was never the person, I'm grateful that I was never somebody who went out and robbed people.
Yeah.
I never got to that point. But had I continued on, I would have been that guy. There's no question in my mind. No question in my mind that's where everybody eventually gets to, you know. It's like, so I'm grateful. I don't know what was in me that stopped me from taking it. Like, what, you know, why could I was okay with hurting myself, I guess, you know. I was okay with, like, yeah, that, but when it came to hurting other people, it really, that bothered me. I didn't want to be seen as a bad person, you know. And I just saw, like I said, I saw how the world will keep going on when you're gone too, which no matter what, it's gonna, right?
So when that willingness hit, what was next?
I went to meetings. I went to a 12-step program.
Yes.
And I completely immersed myself.
What was that like the first time?
Well, so I had seen 12-step all my life since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me that was important was, you know, instead of looking at the differences between you and everybody else, because that's the first thing people want to do. They sit down at a table and they try to find the differences between them and the other people. You know, like, well, I didn't do what that guy did. You know, I'm not like that lady. Instead of looking at those things, I tried to look at the similarities. And I looked at these people who were able to string together, you know, weeks and months. At that time, to see somebody who had 30 days clean, I was like, holy shit, that guy's got it figured out. You know, like, I really was. And he did, in my mind, you know, because he had done something I was unable to do at that stage, at that point in my life.
Yeah.
So I could learn from him. And so I just shut up and I listened and I did what I was told. And I became humble, I guess, you know. And I really got plugged in, like completely plugged in, and really tried to then change.
I've sat in rooms like that, right? Not for myself personally, but for people I loved very much that were there. And so I'm going to give an outside perspective, you know, of what it's like sitting there watching this, because I can't begin to imagine what it's like, the people that are in there.
Yeah.
But the outside perspective for me was a little fucked up, right? Because I'm listening to some people speak that have been clean for 5 years.
Yeah.
Then you listen to 3 or 4 other people talk about how they just relapsed. And my concern is with the person that I was there with.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, well, this would be a very fucking convenient place to find shit. You know, so that's the first concern.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, if they're all fucking relapsing, then this obviously probably isn't a good place to be.
And you can do that there if that's what you want. You can find anything you want there.
But it's obviously these wouldn't still exist if they didn't, you know, if they didn't help people.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm not going to say that, like, oh, anybody who wants to get clean needs to go to.
Oh, no, I know that. I know
I
that.
won't say that, but I can say that it definitely has been a big part of what had helped me, like, restructuring my life. But yeah, man, I mean, early on, I didn't see what I saw in those programs as I did later. You know, like, when I really was ready, then I saw what I needed, and I gravitated toward the people that were there to win. You know what I mean? I got involved. I asked, what can I do to help? You know, you become the guy who shows up early and makes coffee. You chair meetings. You have to, like, I haven't mentioned this on the podcasts, but I have a learning disability where when I read something and then I'm going to say it, there's this, like, thing that happens in my brain that there's like a delay. So for you to say something to me and then me to write it down, there's this delay in transferring it to something else. So for that reason, reading out loud has always been, like, my nemesis. And now I do it all the time on the podcast. It's like all the time. But it was terrifying to read out loud. And you'd walk in this meeting, and at the beginning, they'd have, like, these 5 different sheets that you go around the room, and different people would volunteer to stand up and read that sheet. And I'd start out by, like, picking a small one. It was just a little one paragraph. And over time, I'd read, like, the big sheet that was like a front and back. And you have to just read that whole thing in front of the whole group. But I did that because it showed willingness. And it helped somebody else. Because if I was there reading that, and you're creating the foundation for that meeting, there's somebody else that's newer than you, and you're helping them. And I learned that the most important thing I can do is help other people in that process. And that's what I do today.
Yeah. So that was as I'm watching this, right?
Yeah.
You know, I have those fucked up, you know, questions like, this is fucked up, this is fucked up. And then there's the person there that's been clean for 7 years.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, this is a good example. This person's been clean for 7 years, but why is he still going?
Yeah.
You see, I was like, why? And it comes down to that.
Yeah.
You know, he's still going, you know, because he's still fighting the same demons. They never go away.
Yeah.
But that one person's first day is still that one person's first day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and they're obviously scared, you know, of a lot of things.
Yeah.
You know, let alone now they got one more thing that they have to try to keep accountable for.
Yeah.
Which is showing up for that meeting, you know, to be able to help other people. And it's interesting when you're the person that's selfish, not thinking about other people.
Yeah.
And then in a very short period of time,
you flip that. Yeah.
It's flipped.
And that's the foundation of what those programs are about. Is about getting outside of yourself and helping somebody else. Because if you've got one day clean, then you've got something that somebody else doesn't have, and you might be able to help them get that, you know. And it's, you know, we can translate that to bodybuilding too. You know, is a guy who's done one show, should he coach? We get questions like that all the time. And it's like, well, you know, I mean, if he's going to coach somebody who's never done anything, and you're completely upfront, hey, I've done one show and I'll show you what I know. You know, is he the best coach? Probably not. Mm-hmm. But you know, he does know more than the guy who's never done anything. So, and you know, that's kind of what recovery is just trying to give back to people. You know, I think that in addiction, I hurt enough people, and you know, I took enough away from society that, you know, and it's my job now to do the opposite of that as best I can, you know, in whatever capacity that is. And, you know, this conversation, this might help somebody, who knows, you know, somebody who might need to hear it, you know, and then being able to teach somebody like how to increase their bench press. I mean, that's helping somebody too. You're creating something positive in somebody's life, you know, or, you know, whatever else we do with fitness, with bodybuilding, with powerlifting, with you guys, you know, it's like, it's good, man. It's good to add positivity to the world. I think that's what we need. No,
it's you think?
Yeah.
So so now at what point does bodybuilding come back in, and then how do you wrap your head around that? Because you tried to use it kind of like as a scapegoat.
Yeah.
And now it's going to come back in. What changed to where you don't feel like you're going to use it as a scapegoat?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, well, number one, I remember that I really got into baking, like brownies and stuff before, like after I got clean.
Like pot brownies after you beforehand.
Yeah. I really got into like baking, and I realized, I was like, oh shit, I'm getting fat. Like it was flat out happening. Like I'm getting fat, and I was like, I want to get back in shape. And, you know, and I recognized that I had used bodybuilding for me as a negative thing in the past.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning that I used it as a drug. I used it as, you know, I think as an addict, you know, and being an addict, it's not just the drugs. For me, it's the way that you handle things. You know, you can abuse drugs, you can abuse a video game, you can abuse a relationship, women, you know, you can abuse like jobs, you can get obsessed with just making money, you know, and you feel like, well, I'm on top of the world, I'm rich now, you know.
There's your reason to be selfish.
Yeah. And I felt like, well, I could do that again, you know, with bodybuilding. So at first I got in just, you know, very light by my standards, you know what I'm saying? Like I was still doing like 5-day split and all that. And I didn't use any gear for like the first couple years, so something like that. And then when it came to that was a whole other thing. But the reality is having gotten into recovery, that was what gave me the balance. Like, I didn't have to struggle to be like, well, don't go to the gym that 6th day, Scott, or, you know, whatever else. Don't obsess over that food. It was just like the more I focused on being on my recovery, the better everything just fell into place. I didn't have to struggle for things to fall into place anymore. And that's what the real difference was, which kind of blew my mind. You know, in the past it would be like, oh, I'm going to get involved in this, but just know you could go off the deep end.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, no, now I have balance. And I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm perfect today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I can get obsessed with anything still. And I do, you know, but I have to, like, I keep that in check. And when that happens, I need to look at that, you know.
So during the first 2 years, what kept you off PEDs?
I was kind of, I can say it was maybe at least the first 18 months. I'd say close to that. 18 months, 2 years. I felt like, number one, I didn't need it for what I was doing. And number two, I felt a little bit afraid. You know, to me, I never felt like taking a PED was going to, you know, have the same effect as a recreational drug. But I do know that if I were to take a PED, and that would allow me to get delve further into bodybuilding, you know, be able to be, you know, more obsessive, be able to focus more on my training, get more out of it, do more, push further. I could see myself like, oh, I'm afraid I could get lost if I were to start doing that. And so for that reason, I waited. And eventually I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready. And I had a sponsor at the time that I talked to about it, and he didn't tell me not to. He left it up to me. You know, there were some people at the meetings that were like, no, that's a drug, just like anything else. But I think a lot of them didn't get it either, you know? Like, I remember somebody telling me, like, oh, come on, man, if you take a shot of a steroid, like, that's got to give you, like, a rush, you know? You got to feel that. It's like, you know, you ever take, like, a corticosteroid for poison ivy? It feels kind of like taking that, you know?
Well, if heroin's your drug of choice, it's still a needle prick in the skin. So there is a feeling and a sensation with that.
Yeah.
That's not the actual drug.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You can get in a nice car that's a race car,
yeah,
and just sit in it and smell the leather and all that other kind of shit, and then get back out, and you still wanted to put the pedal down. You see?
Yeah, I guess it depends on.
I've not been in that situation, right? But I could see where they would make that correlation.
Yeah, and and put it this way, if somebody came to me, and I have had people come to me because I've talked about being in recovery, people have come to me and said, hey, I don't think I feel comfortable taking a shot because of my history of drug use, and my thought is, then don't do it.
Yeah,
you know, flat out don't do it. But you know, whether I was able to justify it or what, but my thought is it's a delivery system, you know, just like taking a pill is a delivery system, and that's the way I was able to look at it.
Okay.
There are certain things in this day that I'm not a fan of still. I don't like giving blood. I don't like doing IV shots of any type. That stuff creeps me out. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, I'm all right. Like I feel okay with that, you know.
Mm-hmm. So when you start going down that rabbit hole, right? Because a lot of your content is based around deep dives, you know, in certain compounds. So with that, where did that come from? Did that come from you want to know more about this compound to make sure it's not something that could mentally be addicted, or just because it was something you were super interested in? Because we can go like Tren, right, is going to definitely affect somebody's mental processing
absolutely
differently than test suspension test ethanate, or something like that, or mint, you know, compared to Anavar. Right. So did that play into it at all, or did that not even factor in?
At the time, no. My thoughts were more, I mean, the only thing I was really concerned about was anything that would make me feel different when I took it. Like my first contest prep, I didn't use ECA. I just felt like I don't want to get all stimmed out and feel that feeling. To me, that's not something I don't want to take a pill and then get an effect and then be all wired. And then, you know, to me, that felt like a risk to me, you know. So that was, as far as concerns go around PEDs, that was kind of my big
wouldn't
one.
that be any stimulant though? I mean, and anything to help you sleep as well.
Yeah, but definitely that, especially like early on. And since then, I became okay with using ECA. I'm not a fan of it, but I'd used it at a few points. But earlier on, like I was kind of testing the waters of, you know, like, you know, you getting into recovery, then it's like everything was like totally, life is totally by the book. And then I'm into bodybuilding, and it's like, I mean, just everywhere in life, like you start figuring out how to make your life work, you know, with it. And I don't know, everybody's got their own, that's where everybody has to draw their own lines and be honest with themselves. Like for me, you know, I'm okay with what I've done. Another guy, he might not be. Another guy might be like, oh man, no, that's not recovery. You're not clean. But, you know, that's okay. Because I'm happy with my life now, you know?
Well, I mean, you've interviewed tons of people, right? So just making the statement to draw their own line is a big ask for a lot of people.
What do you mean?
Well, you have a reference. You have an anchor.
Yeah.
All right. You're an addict, right? So you have an anchor. You know where a line can be drawn.
Right.
Now you take somebody that doesn't have an anchored system, and say everybody's got to be comfortable with wherever they draw that line, where they don't even know the line that they're drawing, right? So. Thus, we could end up with somebody taking 20 grams of shit per week, you know, 50. You see what I'm saying? Because there's, yes, they should have a line, but they don't. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess though, like,
it's a wise statement, and it's a statement everybody should follow. But those people that may be listening here don't have a reference with what that is. So in that bodybuilding world, say if you're mentoring somebody, how do you base where that line's going to be? Is that line where it begins to impact other people? Then you need to scale things back. Is it when it begins to impact your ability to pay bills? Is that there's different ways to draw the line.
Yeah.
But I've been around these sports long enough my entire life to know that once you get in a certain rabbit hole with a certain personality type.
Yeah. Well, my thought has always been with anything, and this is somebody that's in recovery or not, is use the least amount to get the result that we need.
Well, in a perfect world, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, you know, you take that least amount and you're like, well, I'm doing good. But if I were to add, you know, 250 more milligrams, then what would happen? And I think that's to me like where the recovery comes in. So at least I can only define that for myself.
Yeah.
You know, but that's where that line would be like, hey, do I really need that 250 more grams and milligrams? And and that's not saying that I had never crossed that line either. You know what I mean? It's like,
I think that's the only way you know what it is.
Yeah. And there's definitely been points where, like, in going back now, I would say like that was too much. There was no need for that, you know? So, yeah.
When on this journey coming back, what was the first show?
The first show was 2008 then. No, 2009.
So 2 years in.
2 years in, 2009. And it was we didn't have novice shows at the time. Excuse me, they didn't have the novice division. So you'd have a non-qualifying show. And that's where a lot of guys would start their first show. So that was my first show. Was 2009 then. And I felt pretty good about it. I was a middleweight, you know, and for the record too, I was never a great bodybuilder. You know, I'm not a national level guy. I'd be the kind of guy that if we were going to be in the same class at a state level show, you would probably be worried, like, oh, well, I know Scott's going to show up, so I'll have to be ready for that. Like, that's the kind of guy that I think that would be me at my best, you know? So it's not like I was shooting for my pro card or anything like that, but I still trained, like I did.
It's still the same process though.
Yeah, and it still meant just as much to me. Like doing that first show, even though I didn't look good for it, in my opinion. Now, especially in hindsight, like I loved that, man. I know we talked to you about your bodybuilding experience and competing, man. I had the opposite. Like, man, this is the coolest thing ever, and it taught me so much. Like, because I actually followed through. I in that period before that 2005 to 2007 period when I was lifting but not in recovery, I tried to compete. And like I couldn't make it happen. I couldn't keep my shit together in order to make that happen. And I finally was like able to follow through, and I felt so good about that, And I had the pictures and like got to stand on stage and go through the whole process. It really built a lot of confidence for me. And
before that, what was the last thing that outside of the recovery is always, there is no end follow through. It's always following the path, right?
Yeah.
So before that, what was the last thing that you can remember that you actually followed through on?
I mean, man, I it's hard to say. I really feel like I quit a lot of things in my life, and I cut myself short. I feel like I never had a tattoo, but I distinctly remember at one point saying, if I were to get one, it would say "Born to Lose."
Yeah.
I was going to get it on the back of my neck, and I just felt like that would sum me up pretty well. And I was from the 90s. I was a kid of the 90s, so I kind of did the grunge thing. So I was into that self-deprecating thing, and I felt like that was like I didn't ever, I don't know, when I was a kid, I didn't ever think about growing up, you know?
When on Friday, I had Travis Rogers out here, and we were talking about powerlifting, and everybody who competes in a powerlifting meet has a story. If it's the best lifter of the meet or somebody that's his first show, right? Sometimes the best story is the person that's their first meet that doesn't even lift the most weight, right? So in your case, when people will speak about bodybuilding, and I think this is true with all strength sports, we lose sight of what you're really in it for and what the sport really is, right? So you may not have placed, you might have been fucking last, but that could have very well have been the first thing in your life you ever followed through on. That's a big fucking deal. That's maybe a bigger deal than the person that won the overall.
Which I did get second in my class. I missed first by one place.
But you see what I'm saying? So a lot of times people will see, those people up there and say, oh, they're not that good, the genetics aren't that good, they kind of suck, but they don't know the story. Now in bodybuilding, you do get people that just jump up there, I think sometimes just for shits and giggles, just to see what it will look like and what will happen. But sometimes there's a story there too, where it's a big thing that's not always about the genetics and always the potential and all the other thing. It's a very cool thing, because you can build off that.
Absolutely. Right? And then I did build off of that, and then I came back and I got better, and I came back and I got better, and that gave me confidence in other areas of life too. And it got to a point where people started asking me for advice, and I was able to help others, and it's like, it did so much positive for me. It did give me an outlet too. So, we talked about how exercise in bodybuilding could potentially be a bad thing. I also want to say it could be a really good thing for early recovery, because to me, a lot of the recovery program I was in focused on all the mental side of getting clean, which is so important, completely necessary, but it didn't give you a physical outlet. And I needed something physical that I could do with my energy and with my anger. I had like a lot of self-hate. I really was angry at myself for what I had done, like where I had gone to and the mistakes I had made and all of that. And so a lot of my early training in those years was really aggressive for that reason. It never really stopped being aggressive, but the reasons changed. It became a positive thing later on. But there was a lot of like real darkness and that I was working out there in the gym, and I needed that. Without that, I don't know if it would have worked for me. So bodybuilding really was a big part of keeping me clean, because it gave me that outlet. And then it also too, bodybuilding is a great, and just exercise, we can just scale it back to that, just exercise. It's a great teacher. you know, because you go in the gym, you put in the work, you eat the food if you want to grow muscle, and then you see the results. If you go in the gym and you don't eat the food and you don't put in the work, then you don't see the results. And it's just brutally honest with you. And it's always going to be, it was like Henry Rollins had the 200 pounds is always 200 pounds story, you know, and that's the truth. And so to me, it was kind of like, you know, I got to train myself to achieve things. And I could say, okay, I'm going to get stronger on this exercise, or I want to see my body weight go up to this, you know, and try to keep this composition. And I could try to do those things. And this is even early on, you know, but like before competing, and that built more confidence. And then if I could do that, then maybe I could do something else, you know, maybe I could do things in the rest of my life that could, you know, make my life better. And it you know, it continued to evolve from there.
What do you think helps connect those two things? Because I'm sure you know as well as I do, a lot of people that succeed in the strength sport world, bodybuilding included, very, very well, but haven't been able to connect the fact that those same attributes that they're learning in the gym, they can also apply outside of the gym.
Yeah.
So there's a connection there, right, that you made. I think I've made, I know a lot of other people that have made, that a lot of others don't. And I try to wrap my head around sometimes, like, what is it? Like, what is that missing factor if we're mentoring or trying to help somebody else in that regard that can help them to be able to see that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just know that I wouldn't be satisfied.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there are people out there that are comfortable with just like, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, somebody who's like, hey, I just want to do my job and I'm happy with that job and it pays me enough money to do what I want to do. And and then I can do all my bodybuilding stuff. You know, I think that's, you know, there are people out there like that. I don't know, because maybe I was like that too for a while. I don't know. You get scared too. Like, if you have a job, if you're comfortable, if you love training and bodybuilding and you're comfortable with your job and it doesn't expect that much out of you, then you know you don't have to work any harder at it. You know you can keep training and doing what you love. So there's some fear then, I think, of changing that. You know, I could see that for sure.
Yeah. That's assuming that they have the job.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking the other realm here.
Okay.
You know, the people that are just doing part-time work or online training or whatever it is, just to be able to do what they love to do, which is their strength sport aspect. So basically, they're doing what I was doing for a long time, but yet I was still going to school and trying to educate myself. It was my first priority, so I was just doing whatever I could do to be able to support my first priority. Yeah. But you know, I always figured that whatever that first priority was, would be able to have the skills and the discipline to be able to carry over to something different at a certain period of time. And I think that's true with anybody that's in any of these sports, because the discipline and all that stuff's there. What I think I had the problem with when I tried to start applying it to different things was I forgot the discipline that was learned in the gym wasn't always easy. Right? When you're younger, you're trying to learn the discipline in the gym. It's not the same. Like, it's either way too extreme, you know, or it's not extreme enough, where after 10 years, you kind of figure out, this is where it needs to be. This is a little bit too much, is a little bit too light, but there's a path here that kind of forms. That's the same thing with any career that you get in. You know, you get in it at first, it's so uncomfortable. Sure. Because the path isn't so clean. Yeah. You know, it's just kind of all over the place, but it's the same process.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is.
You know? Yeah. And that's hard to explain, you know, because the discipline, right, especially in bodybuilding, the discipline's insane. Yeah. You know, it's 24. That's, to me, being in both of those worlds, it's, you know, it's, Justin was telling me we posted or he reposted one of my clips where I'm saying bodybuilding training is simple, you know, and it kind of is when you look at that compared to the training process, just the frickin' weight training part. Right. When you compare that to other sports and, you know, strength blocks and all this other kind of stuff, it's a lot easier to program that
Absolutely.
than it is. But that doesn't mean it's fucking easy. I mean, you still have to do it, but then there's all these other variables. You got to figure the diet out. You got to figure the macros out. You got to figure out the supplementation out. Then if it's going to be at this other level, you got to figure the fucking chemical part. There's so many things, man, because then when you got the chemical part, now you got to factor in your own body's chemicals. If you're under stress, you're producing cortisol. How's that going to impact all this? How do you stay chill when you're on drugs that are making you want to kill people all the time? You see what I'm saying? Like, that is just this crazy, and this is kind of a world that you live in, right? It's this crazy experiment of metrics and variables that's intriguing as fuck when you start looking at it.
I love the way you just explained that. That was great. If somebody asked me what's bodybuilding, I feel like that I want a clip of that.
Yeah,
that's
and
my
I
answer.
forgot things. I forgot things like hydration and other stuff that's going to play into that. There's a whole lot of other shit. Rest, that all has to play into that. There's so many. Like if you had to create a spreadsheet of all the possible metrics that are playing into this muscle growth or fat loss or this end thing at the end of whatever the package. I hate the word package, by the way. That's why I'm trying to find a different word, because I don't like that at all, right? But what goes into that end thing, how many variables are on this spreadsheet that are interconnected into this web that are just fucked up?
Yeah.
Like one off can fuck up the whole show.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's not simple, right? But the point that I was trying to make is going in when you're doing your split.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
Right.
It's
that part is easier.
It's
Absolutely
pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's the other stuff that's just so crazy.
It's to the 24/7 thing. That's really what makes it hard, for sure. And it's funny because I've had people who are like, "Hey, I've been in the military for years. I went through boot camp. I'm a Marine." Or another guy who was like, "I was a professional basketball player. Like, this is way harder than that." Everybody always says it's the hardest thing I've ever done, because it is a 24-hour a day thing that you have to live. And I think that maybe because we have a lot of addicts that are in bodybuilding, I think that that's what we are attracted to. It is extreme, and I can't speak for other people, but for me, I guess that why would I want more? I want more just because I want to know what I'm capable of. I want to keep pushing always, and so I feel like for me, being able to take those tools and then build on them and use them in other areas of my life, it just was it's been a natural thing. So I don't know. I mean, the way we're having this conversation, it makes me feel like I'm pretty lucky, to have that. But to me, I've just taken it as that's what you do,
At what point, because you've been mentoring and coaching for a long time,
yeah.
Would you say that now in your career is more important than your own presence on a stage?
Oh, absolutely. By far.
By
far, absolutely.
When did that swap happen?
Man, so I recognized, I would say midway into competing that I probably wasn't going to be pro. I recognized that whatever I do, I recognized that to me, having a successful show is being the absolute best I can, knowing that I got on stage, doing everything that I could do. And I knew that it was also an experiment, because every time that I've competed, I've learned more that I can help to apply to other people. You learn more tools, you figure more things out. Plus, it keeps me closer to the actual, to doing it, so, and that's, I think, helped other people. So, I don't know, I would say halfway through, I recognized I wouldn't be a pro. I wouldn't be huge. The guys that I've worked with are, far better than me. And yeah, I guess that'd be my babbling answer for it.
Well, you're now in a position to where you can learn from all those people too.
Yeah.
Actually, you're in a more unique position than that, because of the podcast that you're on. You're able to learn from all the people that you have on as guests as well.
That's been huge for me.
So you have this huge pool of knowledge, you know, to be able to pull from, which is different than the pool from knowledge that people are going to get with Google searching and stuff like that, because it's more personal interaction and things like things like that. Over the last, so what is it now, 2022? So say over the last decade, what's changed the most in bodybuilding as far as just prep for the average person?
What's changed the most as far as prep for the average person?
Not the pros.
Yeah, I think in the last decade, I would say it's become a lot more commercial. I would say that it's easier, honestly. I think that prep is easier nowadays than it was a decade ago. You have more shows, you have more options. Honestly, I think it's a little bit more of a money grab for the promoters, because they can get you into several different divisions. So, you know, it's more expensive. Food's more expensive, you know. Everything in life, I guess, is more expensive than it was a decade ago. Right?
Yeah.
I would say there's been a shift toward less chemical enhancement than there was a decade ago. I would say that a decade ago, people at we'll say the state level were pushing a lot harder than they are now. I have more and more people that come to me that say, hey, I want to try to use the least amount possible to do this, because I want to save more for later, you know?
Yeah.
I never used to hear that a decade ago, you know? And there's a lot more people that come to me, and maybe it's because people who come to me also are educating themselves with all the content that's out there. There's so much more content nowadays. A decade ago, they didn't have the volume of information that's out there now. So I think that people are overall more educated going in than they were, and everybody knows somebody that's competed now. A decade ago, you were a rarity, you know, or, you know, more of a rarity.
Yeah.
A decade ago, if you went into a gym, you were a competitor, it would be like you were the guy that competed. And honestly, I really appreciated, like, back then, people gave you respect as a competitor. I remember getting a membership at a powerhouse gym in Farmington Hills, Michigan, and they gave me a discount. Because I compete, they gave me a free mug. They're like, here, here's you compete, here, take this, you know, and if when you win, you know, you bring your trophy, we'll put it up here for you, you know, and there was that was kind of cool. But there was I remember, like, only knowing a couple pros that trained in our gym, and when you'd see them, that was like, wow, that guy, he's like legit special, you know. And nowadays, like, everybody competes, you know. You can say it. If you go into a popular gym today, like, literally half of the people have competed or are planning to compete, and if they haven't, their best friend has. So it's different. I do think that because of that, people are more educated now. They know a lot more about the process. It's become more mainstream. It really has. It really has. DLB, I think, Dana Lynn Bailey, I think she really changed that. She really brought women into it, and it really became more commercial, I think. And I don't think it's a bad thing, though. That overall, I think that the sport has grown in a lot of ways because of the popularity. But definitely, like, before, okay, well, when I first got on stage, men's physique was just starting, and I don't think they had men's physique at my show, so the first time. So that would mean that you would either have to be a bodybuilder or you didn't get on stage.
Yeah.
And now you can be men's physique, you know, you can be men's physique masters, grandmasters, and classic, and everything else and everything in between. So the shows had a lot more people in them. And your class would have a lot more people in them, whereas now, bodybuilding, you know, we might show up against 5-6 guys, or you might be the only one on stage. So
yeah, I
think the competition is not always the strongest now.
What about the access to the coaches when you started?
It was definitely, like, there were far fewer. I mean, I remember, you know, Skip Hill. I remember, like, when he was, like, one of the coaches, you know, like, there was a few, you know, and I used to listen to Skip all the time, you know, years ago, because it was like a rare inside scoop hearing what a coach actually thought and what a coach would do and a coach would say. You want to see that now? Like, let me take you to Instagram. And like, we just go through and through and through. Like, everybody's got something to say. So, and I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but it's so much info, you know, and everybody wants to, you know, be part of the fit community and share their information. So yeah, everybody is there. It's just a lot more saturated nowadays. Absolutely.
That's kind of why I'm asking, because it's, and when I did the shows that I did when I was in college, it was like the gym owner, you know, was a pro, and like, here's your diet, right? And it's just like one page, 5 meals, eat this every day. And so that's,
and it was on paper, right?
It was on paper,
yeah,
right? And so that's just kind of what you did.
Yeah.
And it was probably the same damn thing you gave to everybody, no matter what they weighed. But
right.
You know, that's what it was. And and you just kind of follow through with over that. Now, you know, now there's acts, and that there was nobody else. So like, who else can ask?
Yeah.
Like, there's really nobody else to ask except the other people in the gym that are probably he's giving the same freaking diet too.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe manipulating something here or there because you're fat or whatever he would say at the time.
Yeah.
Where now, as you said, you can go through and there's thousands, you know,
yeah.
thousands upon thousands. So I could say in one way, the way I came into it was not good. Right, and then on the other end, I could say thousands upon thousands is probably not good either. Yeah. You know, where somewhere in the middle is probably where the answer needs to be. Where the difference that I see, and it's more powerlifting related, but it's probably the same, is the self accountability has decreased substantially. To where, you know, here's the thing he gives me. Now I'm 100% accountable at that point. If I have a question, I need to ask him. But other than that, I'm not going to ask him shit, because if everything's going the way it's supposed to be going, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then I have no reason to ask him unless I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm not having the results I'm supposed to have.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ask him if I'm not getting the results I'm supposed to have, is because I just ate a whole package of fudge rounds.
Right.
I know why. You know? So that was huge. Like that accountability was huge, to where it seems now, because there's, and this is in powerlifting coaching as well, because the access is so easy.
Right.
It seems like a lot of that self accountability is just, okay, it's yours now. You're responsible for me. Yeah,
and I'm not a fan of that. And I'm lucky that I'm in a position that, if you know, I'm not desperate, I guess I'll say, for clients, and I'm at a point where if somebody wants to feel that way, I just look at it this way: maybe I'm not the right fit for them, you know, and they can find somebody else that maybe will hold their hand more. But if you don't check in with me, it's not my responsibility to chase you down, you know. And that's something that I used to do more of, like, you know, and part of that I think was like insecurity, like, oh, I don't want to lose a client, you know. But now I just feel like, I look back and ask myself, like, well, would I have checked in? Or if, you know, what would I have done being somebody who really, really wanted it? You know, how would I behave, you know? And if you can't, like, meet those expectations, and, like, you know, just go find someone who's all right with that, you know. I don't know. That's the way I feel.
Well, I think that it's I'm going to say something I've said like 100 times on the pod. I'm trying to figure out ways to say the same things over and over again, right? Where the whole structure is not set up to be conducive to the person that's a good coach. Yeah. Because if the average is $200 per month, right, and then that's what this guy can charge, this guy can charge, and the person that's going to just copy and paste and send shit, that's what they're going to do. Where at that $200 a month, if you have to now speak to them twice a week on the phone for an hour at a time, plus write this plan and put training in with that, you're working for like $5 an hour. Right. You're not going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. You know, I don't know how anybody could handle 80 clients and give service worth a fuck. Yeah. You know, that's going to be anything more than just a copy and paste thing. You know, but they have to, for the value to be worth what, say, old school would be, you go into the gym, you're going to sit there and you're going to talk to the guy who's helping, probably as it was for your first few meets. You're in the gym and the person that's helping you is probably in the gym. Right. And then you're talking things through. And then they're showing you how to do these exercises. They're showing all this other stuff, how to tweak this movement, all that. If all that had to be paid for, whatever the rate is now for a trainer, $75 an hour,
Something
whatever
like
it
that,
is,
yeah.
right? You're looking at $500 a week minimum.
Right.
Right? That's $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Now that $2,000 a month value has to be condensed into 200. It doesn't work.
No.
The math doesn't work.
No, and I know,
Yeah.
like, because I don't charge, I don't
yeah.
charge enough, and I know, I like, my wife tells me all the time, like, you just spent 45 minutes, because like, at the end of the day, I want to help people, you know.
Yeah.
So I invest a lot. Like, if you are that guy, the guy that, like, I ask that question, like, are you really giving your all? And if you are, then like, I'm giving my all too. And the way I look at it is that for me, it is still like me helping people, you know. And I do get the bills paid, and sometimes we get a day off together. So
yeah, no, it plays into that, and it's you know, I come up through, you know, a whole process to where the example I gave of here's the guy that's helping you out and doing all this other kind of stuff is in excess of 5 hours per week. You know, it could be Louis Simmons at 14 years at Westside Barbell, and before that Bob Wall and all these other people I trained with for all this time, and they never charged anything. Now if I was to go back and put a $75 value per hour for every hour they helped me, it would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. My first coach for that first show, I was asking questions on a message board about shows in Michigan, and he commented on my message and was like, hey, you know, I'm in Detroit, and if you want to talk about coaching, you know, drop me a PM. They were PMs back then, not DMs. And so I messaged him, and he says, hey, come out to this gym, you know, let's meet up. So I meet the guy, and I mean, it's kind of, this is an only in bodybuilding kind of story where you meet a guy online, and the next thing you know, random stranger, you're in the locker room pretty much naked with him, you know, only in bodybuilding. Yeah, I know.
Anyway, he became my coach, and he didn't charge me anything, and he became a good friend of mine too, like somebody that I still know. I just saw him the other day, and he literally helped me for free. He wanted to get into coaching, and he was trying to turn it into a business, and honestly, I really didn't have a lot of money to pay for something like that at the time, and he genuinely helped me for free, and he helped me a ton, and in exchange, I wasn't planning on coaching at the time. I told people, you know, I was like, hey, Rick helped me, you know, and that kind of helped him then in to an extent. But yeah, it was like, it was different. People used to, you know, back then people used to just, like, total stranger just like reached out and helped me, which meant so much too, you know what I mean? Because like, I couldn't have done it at that, you know, I mentioned being like in recovery allowed me to do it, but like having the right direction is also, you know, what helped me do it. I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own, not at the level that he took me to.
Yeah, I mean, it's things like that is why I founded the company that I have, to be completely honest with you. And that's also why you struggle, you know, with increasing the rates and all that, but you still have to pay bills. Right? So you still help, you know what I'm saying, that you still put a lot of content out. You're still fulfilling, because I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Like, I don't feel right doing this because they didn't do it. Right. And part of the community of these sports that we come from is actually rooted in that. And I would hate to see that ever completely gone. Right. Because some of the best have come up through systems that they never could have afforded to coach in the beginning. Right. So if it becomes everything has to be, every tiny little thing has to be monetized, then what's the top going to look like? Right?
It'd be really hard for, you know, some guy who just got in recovery a couple of years ago who's working a crappy job to ever do anything at that point.
Because it funnels up, right? So when that happens, you just close the bottom of the funnel. Right? To where by putting out the podcast and all the different things that you're doing, you're keeping that funnel. You're actually broadening that funnel, you know, so it pushes that bigger funnel. Now, there's definitely room up through the funnel for people to monetize. You have to monetize them. If you don't, you can't give the free content. You know, there's one thing a lot of people forget. You know, they just think that these things just pop out automatically without any cost.
And I really always thought, until we talked on my show, I really always thought that Elite was first and foremost an equipment company. I really did. Like, I had always had that in my head, and that the content was in supporting that. And I get it now. I mean, because I always saw all the stuff you put out, but that really I felt was like really special to have learned that.
No, it's with the tagline, educating and outfitting, has always been educating first. That's why it comes first in the sentence. You know, because the educating and then outfitting, then whatever generated from the outfitting helps promote,
I never read taglines.
I get it. But that's a message that it's hard to put out.
Yeah.
Right, because when you put it's hard in these industries to put that out, because when you put that out there, people will first think it's bullshit.
Yeah,
because
really.
they're not going to look, and they just think that all this content just mysteriously comes, out of the bliss.
Yeah,
just out of thin air, it just pops up, and then that's what it is. Or they think it's content marketing, where yes, if it's like a blog. Like one thing, when you're talking a vast amount of content, it's a completely different thing. And then there's the other variable is because it's complementary, it has no value.
Right. That's the other side of it, man.
So I've worked really hard to stop using the word free because free in people's mind carries no value.
Yeah.
So if I say complementary, that has a perceived value, which puts that in a little bit different perspective to be able to push it forward through that.
And with all the content that is coming out now from everywhere, like we're talking about, I do think that has created, the demand is so high because people, I think, don't have as much value for it. Like I said, hearing Skip talk years ago and being like, hey, there's a coach on this podcast. He's explaining how to do stuff. Like that to me was gold. It's like, I would love to be able to, you know what it is though? And you said this at the beginning, you were like, that you don't get thanked enough. There are the people out there, I know you get it too, that really are genuinely grateful. People that maybe they couldn't afford to do anything, but they've read all your articles. And if you were to go on Elite FTS, read everything, like you could learn a lot. You know what I mean? Like you could be really good at this. And there are people out there that will take advantage of that. Not all of them, but the people who do, that's like, that's, I think, who we really do this for,
What it is, and it's the universe doesn't work the way that we all wished it did. Yeah. Like if 100,000 people listen to this podcast, our wish would be those 100,000 people would reciprocate, say we get $1 for each one of those people, right?
Yes.
And that's how we wished it would be, and that's how most of us all wish it would be. Yeah. That's not how it is. Typically how it is the people who are going to be receiving the message, who's going to receive the content or use the content, a very, very, very small percentage of them will support the company that's putting the content out. Yeah. Very small. But the universe doesn't work that way, because where's the other 90% of those customers come from then? Right? Because as say you can throw a ball into a fucking field and expect that ball to come back, right? It won't. But where the other if 100 balls do come back, but you only threw one out. And those other 99 weren't people that received the message, where'd they fucking come from? So you put good out into the world, you try to help the world's going to find a way to help you.
Yeah, and I do believe in that too.
So that's what kind of gets lost a lot of times when people will get frustrated in these industries and stuff like that, is because they're looking for this one-to-one return. But then they forget, like, where did these other people come from? Yeah. Right? Because they may never have absorbed it. They may not even know you have content. Right? It could just be a referral of a client that you worked with. Absolutely. It doesn't know you to have all this other stuff.
Yeah, they just know the equipment or know these bands or hey, where do you get those bands? I order them from Elite. Here's the website.
That could be most your clients. Yeah. Right? But that's one, you know what I'm saying? That one is kind of created out there. Yeah. So it's kind of keeping your eye on what's the purpose. I don't like to say what's your why, right? Because it's overplayed too. I don't like overplayed things. Yeah. Because of that. But what's the purpose, and then how's that kind of come back from there? And it all stems back, to, for you want to give back, and it's very easy to see where that came from. You see, so if that gets pulled away, and you don't feel like that's actually happening, then what happens then? Right. That's more of a question that needs to be addressed than what happens if bodybuilding was ever taken away. Yeah. Because bodybuilding wouldn't be, from what I'm hearing from you, that's not your drive. Yeah. You know, it's helping others and giving back. The cool thing about that is you can do that till you die.
Yeah, you really can. And I don't think it ever will be taken away. I mean, they could take YouTube away from me any day of the week. That could happen. But
Sure.
it, you know, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with things that feel like world ending. You know, something happens and you're like, oh my God, this literally changes everything.
A couple times a year.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it comes up every several months. One of those things happens, and then you love it enough that you retool and you figure out a way around it. You know, and I think that's the kind of thing that comes from bodybuilding for me too, is knowing, okay, well, let's figure out the way around that. You know, there's always a way, and sometimes it means taking a big hit, and sometimes it's meant like when we moved from, we used to be on audio only, and when I rebranded to YouTube, I had a situation go down business wise, and I had to get rid of my old audio account. I had to start fresh, and I started fresh with 0 subscribers, and I went from feeling comfortable.
Did you still have the archive content though?
Yeah, but it wasn't mine. So,
okay, all right.
And I had to basically though start over. And when I started over, I went from like, you've got your community, you've got your community, to like literally having to rebuild. And it's crazy because, you know, some people will find it, some people will come over, some people are following, but some people just never even knew, you know? So it's like, you know, and that was, to me, that was a really terrifying like moment of like, but there was no point in my mind where like, okay, I'm going to stop. It's just, you know what I mean? Like, because it's still like, it's still there. People still have questions. I remember back when like the first people would ever ask me a question at the gym, or somebody would DM me, you know, on a message board and ask me a question. And it felt so good to be able like to have the information that I could teach them something. And now it's like, honestly, like 20 people a day, if not more, on my phone alone on WhatsApp, or, you know, that I talk to or messaging me. I can't keep up with like all the DMs on Instagram and stuff. So it's like, it's cool to know to be in a place where you can help, that you are offering, and that people want it, you know. And I don't see that going away ever,
No, it's not going to go away. I think it's the struggling part with that is all those people that are DMing and asking the questions, some of those topics are already covered in videos that you've already made. Yeah. You know,
but if they say that enough, that tells me that I need to make that video again, right?
That's kind of where I was going.
Okay.
That's where a lot of those ideas can come from.
Yeah.
Because there is an attrition rate.
Yeah.
I think that it's faster than we all want to admit it is. You know, when it comes to content and all this other stuff, that you just assume people know that this is your background, you know, this is what you've done, you know, you're always in recovery, that you've competed and all that. They don't. Yeah. You know, a lot of the newer people that are coming in listening to the content or listening to this podcast have no idea what my background is and all this other stuff. All they know is this point forward. Right. So you can't rest on what your past is, right? Because that's never going to work, and you got to know what the needs of the content or the people are today, and then how to reframe all the other stuff. But it's also kind of reassuring and refreshing, because you don't have to worry about, well, what happens if half my content has to get axed. Yeah, that is true. Right, because if you go back, and we have like 1 million pages of content if you really go back and look at all of it, because the Q&As, each one of those was a page, and you look at the traffic on most of those pages, it's like 0. Is it now? Yeah, okay. Of course, because we've been around for 25 years. I mean, there's a lot of content that's out there, you know, and you can't expect people to go find shit from 20 years and isn't even relevant today anyhow. True. You know, so there's all that, which is, as an education provider, there's always stuff. You know, there's always stuff to talk about. It's sometimes I think we need to revisit things sooner than we would like to. It's more like a newspaper. This is the way I always try to put our podcast. It's more like a newspaper article than a novel. You know, it's something it does have an expiration date, and there's going to be another one tomorrow.
You know, it's not something you have to, and at the same time, you don't have to put the amount of work into it that you do a novel either, because it's going to be shorter. It's going to be easier to put together. You get it together, you get it out, and then you start working on the next one. And I think that's a big mistake that people make who want to get involved with content making, is that they try to turn each piece into this epic thing, when in reality, it's like, just get the information out and keep moving. You know, like you guys have put out so much, and you can't get caught up laboring over that one detail. You know what I mean?
It's too much. You know, plus if you'll never put anything out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You know, there was a time, because there's been different iterations of the podcast over a period of years.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I was telling you beforehand, the first one was like sticking something on a phone and just recording it. And then that didn't last very long. It was like 4 episodes. We couldn't support the bandwidth. And then there was forget which the next iteration was. Actually, the Tabletalk kind of thing started as not even a podcast. It was just, I was working with it had to be Shelby, because there's a fucking ton of cardio, right? So was it John, was it Justin, or was it Shelby? Because it was a ton of cardio, so it had to be Shelby, right?
Okay.
So I'm working with Shelby at the time to cut weight, and I'm like, this is boring. I'm fucking on a treadmill for like an hour at a time.
Yeah.
So I would just start answering people's questions, and I called it From the Mill.
Okay.
Right? So I just answer the questions. It's on YouTube, and I'm just answering questions on walking on the treadmill.
Yeah.
It makes it go faster.
Absolutely.
Well, then that diet phase ends, and then I don't have to do that. And I'm like, I don't need to do this on a treadmill. I'm going to do it at a table.
Yeah.
So now it's just a table talk, and I just sat there and answered questions on
I love
YouTube.
that.
You know, so it kind of just started as a camera recording, just on a tripod, me hit record, and then answering the question, and then posting it on my training log or whatever it was. And then we went into trying to do a real production podcast, and it was taking so fucking long, you know, just with post edit. You know, so here's this, and then all the mixing and all the other stuff and all the stuff. It was like, this is fucking ridiculous. It's gonna be like one episode per every 5 weeks,
right?
And that's not gonna work. No. And then that got abandoned really quick, because I'm like, there's got to be an easier way than this. Yeah. Because the whole time I'm like, and this is podcasts where they weren't at the infancy. They were popular. They were growing. I can't think of how many years, say 5 years, 6 years ago, something like that. Okay. So I'm always thinking in my head, some kid is doing this, some junior high kid is doing this right now. Oh, yeah. In their bedroom. Yeah. At a way faster rate, you know, at zero cost than what I'm doing right now. Right. This is bullshit. Yeah. And then it went to a sport performance podcast, which was done with a telephone and plugging some cord into the telephone, which Mark Watts did. That's crazy. And then it kind of, so how did yours start? You know, how was, because you're going back a long way. Yeah, I mean, there were some good shows before us, you know, and I started in 2015. So that was called Bodybuilding Nerds Radio. And originally it was with a guy I met at the gym. Like, I literally didn't know this guy, but I saw him and I was like, you know what, that guy looks like, and he's a bodybuilder. I'm like, he looks like he's probably about my size, and we're about the same height, and we'd probably compete against each other. So I introduced myself, and it turned out his name was VJ Peary. We both listened to the same bodybuilding podcasts. And so we ended up, you know, we'd get a workout in, do our own thing, and then we'd end up doing cardio together. And then we'd say, hey, did you hear PED radio this week? Did you hear what Skip said? You know, or something. And we'd start talking, and before you know it, we would talk about all of our favorite bodybuilding podcasts all the time when we're doing cardio. And he thought, he was like, hey, and I remember my girlfriend said something, and his girlfriend said something, he said something, and he was like, why don't we do a podcast? And we'll do it about our favorite bodybuilding podcasts. We'll call it Bodybuilding Nerds Radio. So we're like, yeah. And it was cool. You know, I was working my day job after I came back to Michigan, after I got out of photography. And at this point I was clean, and I had already competed and stuff, and, you know, was still competing a lot. And, you know, he was coaching and I was coaching, and so it was a way to also kind of create, you know, advertisement. Yeah. But mostly it was just because we loved bodybuilding, and it was kind of like a show just about celebrating that. And we talk about shows and talk about our favorite bodybuilders and do supplement reviews, and we developed a really cool format for it, which I really liked. And I think that having a format helps shows a lot. So we would have these segments through
through the show. But the only thing we couldn't do really was interview people. And at this point, like, people know who we are because we're talking about them. You know, they hear us talking about them, and it's like, that's a great, if you want to make friends, like, say nice things about people. You know? And, you know, so I started wanting to interview people, and it just didn't fit in our format, you know? So I started my own thing so I could do an interview show, and that became the next podcast. So we had Bodybuilding Nerds Radio, and then a completely separate thing on a different RSS feed was Advices Radio. And I my first interview was like one of my clients who was a men's physique competitor. Like, it was just to get it out there. And then it started building and, you know, growing, and I started getting really good pros on and stuff.
How was that set up, though? How was that?
That was done through a website.
Mechanics, through a website. Through
a website. Now, Bodybuilding Nerds Radio, on the other hand, we eventually got it kind of wired. But in the start, it was me talking into a microphone that was plugged. It was like a nice Shure microphone, but it was plugged into my computer straight. And then VJ on the other end was playing me through his speakers. So we had Skype set up. So that would come out of the speakers, and then he had GarageBand, just a recording program. He'd hit record on that. So he's hearing me come out of his computer speakers and recording that sound.
Yeah.
And then he was talking into his desktop microphone. So it was like real janky sound.
It was.
I mean, it wasn't like suction cup to a telephone, but it was. So it didn't matter how good my quality was. Because it was coming out of a speaker and then getting getting recorded. Like, if I were to play something off my phone right now, you know. So the first couple dozen episodes sounded like garbage, but it got better, and we kind of, you know, we got USB mics and all of that, and then it just kept developing from there.
So with the interview one, how was that done?
That one was just we had already figured all that out. So then I just used Skype. And I had a Skype recorder set up. So I had a program set up on Skype where we could just record audio conversations. And so you just call somebody on Skype and we'd go to it, you know? So, and those were easy. Like looking back at it, man, compared to now, like you might have a 30 megabyte video audio or, you know, file that would upload in a matter of a minute. Editing was, you know, so much more simple than trying to do video. It's like there was a big learning curve going to video, but, you know, that was easy. That was uploaded to a website, and then from there, you know, disbanded out to, you know, the RSS feed to iTunes and all of that stuff.
Now, I assume you had a format for that as well?
What do you mean?
For the interviews?
It depended. It depended on the person. Sometimes, like, maybe it was somebody who maybe just did a movie, like a documentary film or something, and maybe it would be all about that, and I'd have questions set up. And then other times it might be more educational, because I really wanted to focus on teaching people stuff. And the real reason was that I wanted to learn stuff. So I wanted to bring on people that would teach us stuff that I wanted to learn. So I could bring on, like, one of my early episodes was with a lady named Colette Nelson, and she had a lot of really great information about microdosing insulin. And this was like in 2016, and she was one of two people I knew that were using low dose insulin through the day versus what people might call the Milos approach of like high doses around training kind of thing. So that kind of stuff is what I really was into. So the questions I had were geared around, you know, trying to learn. What do I want to figure out? What do I want to find out about these people, and what do they know? So that was really, I think, my big drive for those interviews.
Then what are the shows now?
So now we have Blood, Sweat, and Gear, which you were on. And that's with coaches Skip Hill and Andrew Berry, both incredible coaches. And the three of us will do roundtables on Q&As, and then we take, you know, like listener questions. We take all our questions off of YouTube or our Patreon page, and we have guests occasionally. We're getting into it more. When we had you on, it was an idea that we wanted to start doing more guests. And we've actually, since we had you on, we're putting a format together that we like better for that idea.
Yeah.
Because initially it's interesting because like we're doing one-on-one. It's easy, I think, to do a one-on-one interview because if I'm not talking, you're talking.
Yes.
But to get 4 people involved in the conversation is a little tricky. So I think we're finding a sweet spot with that, which I'm really happy about. And then I have Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson, and Scott goes deep, into some incredible bodybuilding science, and that's probably our most high-end show. Some people, and here's the thing, not everybody likes all our shows, but there are some people who tune in and they're like, man, Scott Stevenson's my favorite because he'll explain studies and interpret them and explain why things make sense or why they don't. And he explains all sorts of really cool stuff about like the triglyceride stores in our muscles and how we can do fat loading and how much volume you're going to get out of that versus carb loading. And then we have It's Just Bodybuilding and with 2 pros, Ron Partlow and Dusty Hanshaw, and they're both retired now, and it's kind of like a fun show. Because here's my thought is, as much as education is the drive, you have to be entertaining too. I'm sure you've seen some stuff where it's like, this is incredible information, but I can't keep my eyes open, So it's like, it's got to be engaging.
Yeah.
And those guys are funny as hell. So we have a lot of fun on that show. Plus, you get to hear some perspectives of guys who have taken it to the pro level. And I mean, gosh, Ron Partlow competed. I mean, this dude, so he's from Canada. He competed at the national level like 13 times. He took second place. You got to, and his in that time, like you had to get first to win.
Yeah.
So he was a second place guy like 13 times at that level. I mean, he had worked so hard and he was so close. He had a great physique too. It was just, there was always one other guy, 1 point away or whatever. So we've got that show, and I think in Drugs and Stuff with Dave Crossland. He does a lot of harm reduction stuff out of the UK. So, and I try to get out 3 to 4 podcasts a week, and now with some changes we're making to Blood, Sweat, and Gear, we're probably going to go to 5. So it's busy. Every morning is an upload, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're doing all the upload. Who's the mixing, all that?
I do all of it. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. So I'm there on all the shows and host all of them except for It's Just Bodybuilding. Ron hosts that one. I get to like kick back and just, kind of make sure the guys don't go too far off course for that show.
Yeah.
And make sure they don't swear too much with the new YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
But, outside of that, I make sure like everything's situated and, host everything and then edit everything, do all the thumbnails. I literally do all the work for it pretty much.
Are any of these live?
So what I've been doing is we have a Facebook group for Think Big Bodybuilding Media, and I go live there for most of them, and so we can get some group interaction from a smaller controlled group of people that see us all the time, and then from there the edited version goes out to YouTube later.
Got it.
That way, because I like the live shows, but I want to be able to have the post-production quality that I want to be able to add to it. Sometimes I'm dropping in little clips here and there, funny stuff and all that stuff, intros, music, whatever, and I can't do all that live the same way. So the people who watch at YouTube or at Facebook, they're watching the live and they're interacting, and then YouTube gets the final version. YouTube, and then of course iTunes and all that, the audio as well.
So you made a decision early on to make PEDs a topic when it wasn't a big topic, amongst all the other stuff that was out there. Yeah. Why?
I just felt like it's something we needed to educate ourselves about. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn flat out. I remember being on message boards talking with guys that were real big drug users, but not really in the competitive world. And they're talking about all this, like take for instance IGF. And they're talking about like all this IGF use and how you do it and all this. So, I'm a guy who's sitting there thinking to myself like, oh, well, you got to have IGF to be a pro bodybuilder. Like, and it's just in my head, like these guys all have to be doing this, there's no other question. And then I hear a guy like John Meadows say, no, I never touched IGF. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. He never did like that was a kind of an eye-opener for me. And so So I wanted to talk to the people that were actually doing stuff and learn from them, you know, and help to get that information out there then.
How open were they of doing that, though?
Some people were pretty open, you know? Yeah. I think part of it, too, was that the podcast was so underground, there was like an element of like not really having to worry about anybody hearing it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Versus today, like it's crazy how many podcasts there are. But back then, I would say
it's more underground today then, right? Because it's so diluted.
that's a way of putting it. But like back then, like just, you know, I would say bodybuilding was a cult within fitness. And then people who listened to podcasts and were bodybuilders were even a smaller cult. So like the amount of people, like you could go to an expo and, you know, there might only be a small percent of those people that actually listen to podcasts. You know, a few weeks from now, you go over to the Arnold Classic, I bet you that everybody is listening to at least one fitness related podcast, you know? So it's like, it was a lot deeper, you know, versus everybody knows about podcasts now.
Now there are times that you're interviewing these people and you know what they're telling you is complete bullshit. You know, so an example I would be probably more so what we would see today than back then is everybody's just on TRT dose. So everybody's on 150 milligrams of test. Meanwhile, you know, there is no fucking way that you're on 150 milligrams of test.
I feel like the people who have been on low, because I've talked to people who've claimed low gear, and I've really believed them.
Yeah.
If somebody isn't, I haven't really called them out. I don't think it's my place.
No, I
like,
wouldn't either.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either. I'm just saying, how often do you think that actually happens?
I don't think it's often because I feel like the people who are using high doses, sometimes they just don't want to talk about gear. You know, and the guys who, like, what I really see, and this is the thing that's so hard for people to understand that are on the complete outside, is that the guys who are the best are going to be the best anyway. It doesn't matter about the gear. Like if we took gear away from everybody, those guys would still be the best. They wouldn't look as good as they do with the gear, but they definitely look their best because, you know, because of their genetics, you know, and so a guy who's going to be in that position, he's not going to need as much. Like Dusty, for instance, who I mentioned does our shows, he said his first cycle was 100 milligrams of Primo per week. 100 milligrams of Primo. I can't remember what he said he gained, but it was like 20 pounds. You know, and so he's a guy who's like, I never took a lot because I never needed a lot, and I genuinely believe him in my heart. I have had a couple situations. I had a guy where I know somebody was lying and it pissed me off and I didn't say anything. I had a guy who I know his coach, and I know this guy was cheating on his diet, and he blamed his coach for not bringing him in hard enough. And I just kind of held my tongue, and it really pissed me off, and he hasn't been back on the show since.
You know? Where would you say that most of them they'll start on a dose, and I mean the perception is their dose is always going to be higher than what it really is. But from what I've seen in the world that I'm in, people will keep pushing their dose to a point. And then it stops helping them. It actually begins to work in reverse. They can't recover, you know, and it ends up coming back down to this more moderate baseline dose. Does that same thing happen in the bodybuilding world? Granted, there's more compounds.
There's more compounds, and I don't know what you guys do dosing. I've heard some stuff, you know, and I know you guys can go really crazy, especially, and I get it, like you get close to the end of, you know, you're getting ready for a meet, and I've heard people say like, hey, how many D-ball do I have left? Well, that's how many I take, you know? But I don't know. I can't really answer that question because I feel like it's real individual, but I do think that, everybody is trying to use, you know, I don't know. Like, put it this way. I think 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, people were pushing the doses a lot more than they are now. And I think that everybody is afraid due to deaths in the recent years that they're concerned. And now the focus has shifted to, well, what's the least amount I can take?
Well, 10 years ago, were they using the same compounds as they're using now.
Absolutely.
So say 10 years ago, there still was GH, there still was insulin, there still was clan, there still was thyroid, there still was the anabolics. So all those were in there still.
Yeah, still all of them.
Yeah.
High doses being higher,
Yes.
Guys that were taking, 1.25 grams or, 1.5 grams or more test, in those, now the attitude is like, hey, well, can I get away with less? And there's this whole movement now of like low test, high primo or high master on. And, there's some weird stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, but people are trying to look at like, well, what can I do to stay healthy? Really, there are so many people that are like, I don't want to get big. I don't want to look like Nick Walker if that means I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like I look at Nick Walker and I'm like, man, that dude's incredible. And somebody else is like, yeah, he's heart attack waiting to happen. It's like, come on.
I mean, you could have a classic guy that's the heart attack waiting to happen, right? So you don't know what their dosing is or what their blood work is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the guys at the shows I went to were taking a lot, that I was in middleweight, or light heavyweight. So
have you seen that the compound of choice trends, not trend, but it trends. Like 1 year, Masteron and Primo is going to be more push.
That is so hot right now.
That is now.
That's the big thing, I think, for people, and especially, I think a lot of the people who follow our content, especially on YouTube, aren't competitors. I think a lot of them are just guys that want to get in better shape.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our market has been more geared toward them. People who are like, they call it the TRT plus crowd, where it's like TRT, but, with Master on as well. And, they kind of stretch that, like.
Why? I mean, why they go that route and then just something else?
They think that, the idea is that it's going to be healthier, that they don't want to take the risks, they don't want to hurt themselves. So, here's the thing is that it's like they don't want to deal with like an AI, for instance. That's one thing, and I get it. Like, we don't want to have to dose up. That was a thing 10 years ago. You just be like, well, you take a bunch of tests, well, you take a bunch of AI. That's all it is, And now everybody's like, well, I don't want to take any AI because AIs are going to give you a heart attack. AIs are going to hurt you. So they don't want to take any AI. So it's like, but your estrogen is at 140. Let's do something about that. Then let's change the gear. But they don't want to change the gear. So then they try to run, like, say, a bunch of master on to try to bring that estrogen down with that.
Okay. And does it?
Yeah, to an extent it does. But I mean, like, what are you going to do to your...
To a big enough extent, though?
Well, if you take enough master on and a little enough test, And I think the thing is that let's not look at things as being so black and white. If you're going to take 400, 500 plus milligrams a test, and that's going to require you to be, if you're going to do that, you're going to have a super physiological level of test, you're probably going to have a super physiological level of estrogen too. So it's like, if you're going to have that, then maybe we want to do something to control that. And does taking another steroid, is that necessarily healthier than taking an AI? And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but let's look at that question versus just villainize estrogen. Or villainize an anti-estrogen, because 10 years ago it was the opposite. 10 years ago everybody was like, we don't want any estrogen, get rid of it all.
With Tren, because that's obviously probably the most popular, right?
Yeah, even like in the mainstream now.
It is everywhere, which is, it was interesting to me because it was a compound where when I was pre-West Side days, the only thing, Parabon, I assume, would be Tren, right? So pretty much the same thing, right? And then that goes away, right? It's not around, for the longest period of time. Then the only way you could find anything close to that would be a cattle implant called Finiplex.
I know those well.
Right? So then there was that. So it's like, who wants to fuck with making shit on a stove? Yeah. So it wasn't even a thing for a long period of time, at least not in the world that I was in, right? It wasn't even part of a stack because it wasn't, nobody could get it. It wasn't even around. It was just like test, D-ball, Anadrol, just that kind of shit. Yeah. And then over the past timeline, I'm old, right? So I forget shit. The last 10 years, like Tren pops out of nowhere. Yeah. And it's everything. Right?
Absolutely.
It's taken over all the other stuff. Why do you think that is?
Because it works. like flat out. You know what I mean?
I get that, but
think,
so's testosterone, ethylene. And
yeah,
stuff.
but it works like it's so strong, and I think that people.
What's that mean, though?
I think that people can, maybe they aren't 100% on their diet. Maybe they aren't great with their training, but they're still seeing those results. And they go in the gym and they're crazy strong, and they're like, yeah, I like this Tren stuff, you know? I think it's just because it's just like so strong, so androgenic, you know? It's got such a powerful effect, and it's so easy to overuse. People are like, yeah, I can't sleep at all, and I'm, you know, got all these anger issues and moody and all of this, but hey, I'm making progress, you know? I might have broke up with my girlfriend, but I'm making progress. I think that it is. I mean, at the end of the day, like, what is it? Like years ago, remember, like it was before my time, but like the doctors and the medical community said that steroids don't enhance performance. You know,
they used to be on the insert.
Yeah, and it's like we know
literally it was on the insert of the package.
So, but we know that it does, and Tren is so strong, it really, you know, enhances performance. So I really think that that's the thing, and then. I know people who've known nothing about bodybuilding, and they come up to me and they're like, hey, so what about that Tren drug? You know, is that what Bumstead must take to look like that? You know, they just like, these are people who literally know nothing about bodybuilding. It's that far in the mainstream. I've heard it mentioned on like my local radio show.
It seems more popular than test.
Oh, way. Yeah.
Which is intriguing to me.
Well, it's got the lore, you know what I mean? It's got the lore of being this, like, you know, this drug that's gonna you know, make you so strong and make your libido crazy, and all these terrible things could possibly happen. There's that risk. It's exciting, you know, it's exotic. Versus testosterone, it's like, it's testosterone, you know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm a bigger fan of test. I think you do. I would rather have a cycle that we didn't have any issues with. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have a cycle where like you can eat all your meals and you feel good, your home life is good, that you're training hard, you're consistent, no issues, and we get through that, and it hasn't been any drama at all. Like, to me, that's a successful cycle. I don't want to have to stop 7 weeks in, you know, because you're dealing with shit. You know?
Let's take a bathroom break real quick, then we'll be back and continue with this part. Americ Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americhealth.com/tabletalk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use, over the counter or prescription. americhealth.com/tabletalk. The discount code is tabletalk. Today's episode is brought to you by Power Rack Strength CBD. Power Rack Strength was founded by Brian Carroll, a good friend of mine. I've been thrown many products over the years, literally thrown many products over the years, which was all junk. So of course I was going to bust Brian a little bit when he first came out with this, until he explained to me how much research and who his partners were that were associated with his company. Then after he sent me some of the samples to test, I was absolutely blown away by the drops. As with most people, I have a hard time falling asleep. I'm cool when I'm asleep, but I have a hard time falling asleep. These were the only thing that actually helped me out of all the different things that I've tried in the past. It definitely makes a difference in my training. So check out PowerRackStrengthCBD.com. Use the code TableTalk2023 and you'll receive 35% off your first order. If I'm pushing anything, I'm pushing the drops first, then I will push the roller second. The balm is good, but I'm just not a balm guy. Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to merrickhealth.com/tabletalk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. merrickhealth.com/tabletalk. The discount code is tabletalk. Okay, guys, we are back. Staying on topic with what we were talking about. You were in attendance during the last SWIS symposium.
Yes.
And there was a steroid panel.
Yes.
And I was on the panel, which at first I didn't quite know why I was going to be on the panel, right? I found out later, why I needed to be on the panel.
I was glad you were there.
Right.
It was
because
good.
What I've seen over my span of being around, what do I want to say, being around the steroid world, being around anabolics, which is a long time.
Yeah.
I've been around them more years than years I've not been around them. Right? Let's just put it that way. Which is a lot of years. And I'll listen to people that were on the panel, and some of them are advisors. Actually, two of them are doctors of mine, so they're advisors of mine and mentors of mine, and people who are responsible for actually keeping me alive, are up there. And even in the past SWIS symposiums, when they'd have panels, there would be moderator questions tossed out, and then the panelists geek out on compounds. They scientific out, on all this kind of stuff. And as I've sat through ones before, I sit there and in my brain, I'm listening, I'm interested, but the other part of my brain is saying, this isn't the real fucking world.
Yeah.
This is not the real world. There's way too many assumptions being made here that shouldn't be being made. And I understand when you have doctors up there, they're going to make certain assumptions and have to make certain assumptions that and don't live in a black market world. Right. So one of the first things that I put out there was, this is all great and this all works until you come to the fact that your shit may be underdosed. It may not be what it actually is.
Sure.
You may think that it's testosterone, but it actually isn't. It's most of the times it may actually be the compound that's just the cheapest to buy, but then they put the label on it. That's going to be the most expensive. It may not be. Let's say if it's Anavar and it's coming in a 50 milligram capsule, how fucking exactly do you take 10 milligrams?
Right.
Now you got to break the capsule apart and just guess on what the 10 milligrams are.
Right.
Not very many people are going to bust them all out, put them on a scale, and put them back into another capsule. So there's all these realities that they're talking about this, and this, but leaving out the fact that there could be bacteria in the shit.
Absolutely.
So how do you know, A, it's real? How would you test that? How would you, if it is fucked up, is there a way you could I'm thinking it's like the meathead here. Let's say it is fucked up and there's something in there. Can I cook the bad shit out? Do I need to just throw it away, or can I just reheat it? You see what I'm saying? If tested, I should say some of this shit. if some of my shit would get too cold and it would start to crystallize, we'll just cook it. Heat
it back up and melt.
Yeah, but
you're good.
This is kind of known on the 90% of the people that live in the world that are taking stuff.
Yes.
It may not be 90% now because TRT is prescribed. Companies like Merrick are amazing, right? Because there's companies out there to be able to help. So maybe it's not 90%. Maybe 50% are getting it from a compound lab that's actually really what it's supposed to be. But all the others are living in this fucked up world.
All the people who are taking a gram or 500 milligrams, because there's no TRT company that's prescribing
that. They live in this fucked up world.
Yeah.
And not only that, the panelists can't talk about compounds that can't be prescribed.
Sure.
Well, that just alleviated fucking 90% of the shit that you can take.
Right. Well,
can't talk about Tren, can't prescribe Tren, right? So a lot of the stuff that you can't. So with the content that you, and by the way, we're not doctors. We're not, all the disclaimers pronounced, right? We're just talking, man. We're just having a conversation.
Yeah. But I have been on Dave Tate's Tabletalk podcast.
Yeah. So you're putting out content, that is educating in a gap.
Yeah.
That needs the education in that gap. Because professional ethics are not going to allow the people that could speak about it to speak about it the way that they may otherwise want to speak about it.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right? So there's a gap. And then on the other side is just the bro science, the person in the gym saying, hey, dude, this is the same shit Jay Cutler takes.
Yeah.
Right? You live in Michigan, but the same shit Jay Cutler takes.
Yeah.
Same source, right? Same lot number. Fucking guy lives in California. Like, not happening.
Yeah.
And this is that reality. So when you're in that middle sphere, how do you determine what to talk about and what content to put out?
That's a really great question. And you know what, too? I just to go back for a minute, because you made me think of something. I thought about the panel, and I thought about how, so this was a steroid panel that we're talking about, anabolic steroid use. And a lot of it was real TRT focused. Did you notice that? And I do think that, and you had asked, like, well, what are the popular compounds? And my response was that a lot of people are looking to stay healthier, to stay safer. That's what their goal is. They want to reach these goals, maybe not be, the biggest guy, but reach these goals as best they can, as long as they don't jeopardize their health. I think that they're looking for, there's a blending now. 10 years ago, we didn't have the TRT world like it is today, and now people are like, well, I'm on TRT, I just want to supercharge that. In the world of TRT, in the world of enhanced anabolic steroid use, are completely overlapped. It's a gray area, totally.
Yeah.
So because you're getting education from doctors now on, of course, certain compounds, and obviously they have some of those lines. And yeah, man, it's crazy the amount of just fake and bunk bad product there is out there. I mentioned the guy I do the podcast with, Dave Crossland, out in the UK. Now, he is an expert witness for their court system. So if somebody were to happen to have a bunch of vials and they get popped and they have to go to court, over there, they're legally allowed to possess AAS for personal use. There's no law against that. But if you have it for purpose of sales, that's another story, and you can be charged. So what they bring Dave in for is to determine whether it could have been for personal use or whether this looked like it was an actual operation. And with that, this is where it gets interesting. The police actually test all the compounds that they get. Everything that they confiscate, it all gets tested. I don't think we do that here the same way.
No,
if stuff gets tested, but they test everything. Dave gets those reports, and he's shared them with me, and he would tell you, like, first of all, anytime you see a blend, that blend is most likely gonna not have some of the stuff, because you'll see what they call blends, and it'll be like, here's your test deca blend, and here's your cut blend, which is gonna be like prop and trenase and mast prop, and it'll be like most of those things will just be like test and Tren, and more Tren, and it's like none of that stuff is really what it says it's supposed to be. So I mean, that's one area we don't really get into a lot. We have to be careful with, because we don't want to ever cross the line of like telling people, hey, this is where you can get good stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we have to be really careful with that. And maybe we could even do better than we do with that side of things. I think that when you've been around for a while, and I like the way you've put it, that when you've been around gear more than you haven't been around gear, then you know, if you ever wanted to get something at that point, you would know where to get it, right? And you would know, you'd have a good, you wouldn't be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt if it's an underground product that it was good, but you could trust the people that you know, and that's really as far as it generally goes. I mean, there is testing out there. I haven't done it personally, but I've seen people do testing, and I've seen some good lab reports on products that I believed in, and it was nice to see. And I've seen some other stuff people have sent me that things were not real. So it's like, I think that's always going to be out there. The way I can tell you I learned was just going through the message boards and going to the source boards and really listening and digging. And man, at the end of the day, though, there's always going to be that level of stepping out there and taking a risk. And I don't think there's any bodybuilder out there that hasn't gotten something that wasn't what it was, that wasn't wrong. Anybody who's using gear, I think that's always going to be some level of an issue. But that's one area that we don't really focus on a ton, I guess. And I guess that's part of it, is like we don't really talk about procurement. So it is assuming that things are legit. If somebody said, hey, I've got this contaminated vial, I'd tell them to toss it. Don't try to, we will give advice on that kind of stuff. And if somebody did have something that crashed, I'd tell them how to fix it. We can tell them stuff like that all day long. But I guess if somebody were asking, I'd tell them what I would look for in a product. That doesn't mean that it's going to be good. And I think that part of it is community, having a community around you that can vouch for it. I think that's the way I had always gone back when I had used stuff too.
Yeah, it's like let the other people take it first.
And then you find out from the community whether it's good. And you got to know I'd know people to ask, like, hey, what's happening with this company now? Are they still good? Before you bought anything from them. But yeah, man, that is really a dangerous place, and it used to be a lot easier to get stuff tested within the US. And then after, I think it was 2006, Operation Raw Deal, it was called, they took that ability away from us to help protect us from ourselves. I mean, it was an interesting the time that I've been around the whole thing. For a long period, it was like smuggled out of the back of rugby labs, and shit like that. And then from there, it moved up a class. I don't want to say it was a misdemeanor. I don't know the facts correct. Rick Collins could explain this better than and he actually did when I kind of brought this up during that thing. So it goes from there, then ends up going to Mexico. And then from Mexico, the border gets shut down, because you can't, the war on drugs or whatever it was. So then it goes to China. So I've seen all these different places that it comes around from, where I joke around and say when I was using that stuff, if it came in a bottle that had a metal lid that you could slip a needle underneath, I wasn't taking it. If it had a flip lid, that you can, because people would slip a needle underneath, because there's just it wasn't crimped, it was just kind of like tap welded, but it left enough room that you could slip a needle right under the lid. So people would pull out half and then replace it with like canola oil or something like that, just so they now have 5 free cc's. Right. Much harder to do if you got to flip that cap off, because then you'd have to recap the whole thing, and nobody was going to do that. So that was like one way. If it was in an ampule, the odds of it being bootlegged were less than otherwise not. But if Stenox was $5 and Parabolin was $15, and they're both in ampules, I'm buying 3 of the Stenox. I'm going off milligrams, just assuming they're all fake. Assuming they're all the same thing, which they might not have been. But when you're broke, you're going to go with the more milligrams per dollar. Of course.
And just crazy shit like that, which is fun stories to tell. Where it's a different world now, because bathroom labs or whatever it is, there's more access
Absolutely.
You know, I suppose, and with what you said, the TRT world, that's a whole, it is a gray market, right? Because you do have, I know a lot of people, probably more people, because I'm older, right? More people now than in the other world that will have their TRT either through their doctor or Merrick Health or something like that. And then they want a little bit extra.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So then they supplement that extra, and then hopefully, you know, their doctor will help mitigate. Hopefully they'll pass that along, you know, to whoever their doctor is for the other stuff, so they know, because how fucked up would that be to not do that?
Yeah.
Because then they're trying to manage and, you know, doses and.
Oh, we get questions like that all the time.
Yeah.
We had a guy who he was taking, you're saying like not tell the doctor what he's doing?
Yeah, so they'll say the doctor's giving them X amount, you know, to be able to maintain a certain thing.
That's a common question now. Like we have a guy who just said he was getting shots in libido every 3 months, and he had to do a checkup every 6 months. The question is, how can I run an effective cycle between my checkups and not have to worry about my doctor finding out? That was the question.
See, I mean, that's fucked up.
You know,
Like,
I think too. You know, it's like I think there's that fear. It depends on the doctor, right? You know, doctor might tell you, well, I'm not going to give you any more libido then. And then you're out of luck on everything, you know? So I do think that people have that fear, but they're more aware too, you know? It's like, well, maybe they're more aware because there's more education now, but it's not just getting your test levels back in order. What about your hematocrit? Like, you can't just get your test levels back in order, crash right in at the end, level them out, and then do your labs. You know, where's your HDL after hammering this cycle for the last 25 weeks? So,
well, that's the other thing. Yeah, that's a big point, right? With the blood work, there's a lot of other variables.
And then your doctor's going to say, oh man, so you've been on this libido for the last 6 months, and look at the way your labs look. You're a wreck from just taking libido.
Yeah.
You know, and we see that like all the time now. And that's what I mean by like cycling has really shifted toward that. What can I get away with? Versus, you know, 15 years ago was how much can I put in one syringe? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is foreign to me, right? Because my doctors, I can be upfront with my doctor, right? So to be able to know and to help them mitigate if there is supplemental stuff in there.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to pimp out Merrick Health like crazy right now because they won't prescribe the high doses.
Of course not.
Right, but they'll help mitigate the damages, and you don't have to worry about saying, hey, look, I'm also going to take this.
Yeah, and we need more of that.
A
really
lot more of that. So
yeah.
it's AmericHealth.com. Links in the description. 10% off your first order. I have the whole labs here. If you really want, go to the page. It will show you all the labs. But it shows how important that actually is.
Yeah.
Right? Because I didn't even, what you're telling me right now, I guess I probably should have known because common sense would dictate that. But I never would have thought that. Because everybody I know is either working with Merrick or their own family or their own personal physician. This is part of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, here's what this is, and you're trying, because how fucked up is that? Because if you don't tell them, and then your markers are all fucked, they're left to think, you know what, this is because of the 150 milligrams of testosterone I'm prescribing.
Right.
You can't tolerate this. We need to knock it down to 76.
Yeah, yeah. And now you're really
fucked.
Yeah.
Well, you really want more.
Yeah. Right.
You know, it's, wow.
Yeah, because
wow.
I mean, but look at it. Look at if you were to give somebody an opiate, and then they went out and got more opiates to take on top of those opiates. And then you tell your doctor, that doctor is not going to want to give any more opiates, and they look at gears the same way. And I think part of it is because of their legal responsibility around this dangerous scheduled substance.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I think that they've got to really watch themselves. And, you know, family doctor says, well, how's that going to look on me? You know, obviously everybody's individual, but how's that going to look on me if I give this guy the green light to do this stuff and I'm prescribing him some of it, and then he ends up, you know, having a health issue.
No, it's a tough spot.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think people put themselves in the physician's position sometimes. Well, I will tell most bodybuilders, meatheads, powerlifters, or whatever it is, if you're being judged by your physician because of that, then maybe you need to find a different physician.
Yeah, but it's better now than it was a decade ago.
Oh my God,
you know,
it's
like,
way better.
Back then, like I had a doctor that she's retired now, but she was a competitor, and so she knew it. I'd sit down with her, and she took notes off the book. Like nothing was put in the book, and so she knew what I was doing, and I could come see her. Like, I'm 4 weeks out right now. I'm considering starting taking Halo in another week. Can we run some labs? She'd be like, "Yep, these are the things we want to look at. I'll give you, I'll give you a call. We'll let you know if you're good to go, or maybe don't take the Halo." You know, and it's like I really did use that to help me make decisions in what I was going to do or not do. You know.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier a podcast that you did where I think you said it was a lady that was talking about insulin throughout the whole day.
Yeah, Colette Nelson.
Okay, Colette. What other podcasts, you've had a ton of guests on, what other podcasts have you had takeaways like that still resonate with you now?
Man, it's crazy because there's just been so many of them, and it's just blurred. And I can't even think, like, it's sometimes I'll look back at the catalog and be like, oh yeah, we interviewed that guy, you know, and there's just been so many things, but more than, like, I haven't done as many interviews in the last couple years. I focused more on building up the show with my co-hosts. Mm-hmm. So a guy like Scott Stevenson has so much information, and just listening to him talk has completely changed the way I look at training. Like, we started podcasting in 2016 together, and he formerly had done a lot of DC training, and he evolved that into his own program called Fortitude Training, and it was all based around higher frequency, lower volume type stuff. And at first, when I met him, and we did that show with a guy named Jordan Peters, who's just huge now, like successfully huge. Everybody knows who he is. He's really brought progressive overload to the forefront of bodybuilding again. Everybody's doing push-pull legs thanks to Jordan Peters. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was training with Shelby, and we were doing John's splits, which was not progressive overload. It was, well, I shouldn't say that. It wasn't high frequency. Yeah. It was like everything was once a week type thing.
High
mostly.
Volume.
Yeah, high volume.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot of volume, and I got a lot out of that. But over the years of talking to Scott, things started making more sense. And just, it was show after show, not one newspaper article, but like being a subscriber, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like, I feel like I've absorbed a lot of stuff, not everything. Some of his stuff just goes over my head still, but it really has shaped like some really important things to me about training that I don't know whether I would have come to those conclusions had it not being influenced by him. And one of the things that I loved is that he is never a person who will tell you need to do this. He'll tell you that you do what you want to do and discover it from there. Like, I remember one time, just even like in mindset, talking about I did this little write-up about going into the gym and being focused and being really intense, and Scott said he read it and he was like, yeah, well, that's really good if that's the way you enjoy training. I was like, huh. I was like, shouldn't everybody? He was like, no, not everybody wants to be like that when they go in the gym. I was like, huh. So it's like, at the end of the day, the most important training split you do is the one that you enjoy, the one you're going to stick to, and so just listening to him talk has really influenced me in such a great way, especially around like learning how to grow muscle, learn in the gym specifically.
What are some of these specific things that you're talking about? Well,
okay, so I did a long prep in 2017, really long prep. Like, I started dieting in February, and I competed several times. The last show I did was in November. So it was a long diet, and I had tweaked my shoulder a little way in. And all along, Scott was talking about high frequency and, lower volume. And the idea being that, maybe you take a guy like Brandon Curry and he can go in the gym and he trains chest once and he just annihilates it at Oxygen Gym. And they're doing this super high volume. And what we discovered, we talked to Brandon about what they do at Oxygen. And it's like,
people who have average genetics won't be able to last there because they can't handle that volume. But if you happen to have the genetics to handle that volume and they will push you to the extreme, you will then excel. So Brandon's a great fit for that, but maybe I'm not, maybe Scott's not. So anyway, I tweaked my shoulder and I started thinking to myself, well, Scott proposes to do a little bit less, but then come back and do it again. The thought being that all we really need is to get that trigger for growth. I don't need more beyond that. I don't need to do like Brandon Curry and spend the next 2 hours in here and then throw up. So what if I were to get that trigger and then stop and then come back a little while later and basically finish my workout on another day? And what I recognized was that, so I went in and instead of doing 4 exercises on my chest day, I did 2. And then later in the week, like on a shoulder day, I did 2. And what I discovered is that you can push your hardest, right, in those first couple exercises. If you're doing volume, there is no way in hell. You get 5 exercises in, you're not training as hard as you did on those first 1-2 exercises. So I learned that I could, all of my sets now, the first day and the second day, could all be that really hard stuff. So number one, I learned that if I could train that muscle really hard for all the sets, I might be able to get more out of this than like training hard and petering off and then just pumping. And so that to me was an interesting thing. And what really was interesting to me was after that prep was over, people started telling me, they're like, yeah, your pecs are one of your better body parts. And that wasn't the case before the prep. So I was in a deficit, for a long period of time, yet my chest grew. I'm like, huh, okay, that's interesting. Now, psychologically, I couldn't do that with my back yet. I could do it with my legs because I had done quad days and ham days. I couldn't do it with my back yet. I had it ingrained in me from doing John's programs for 5 years straight that I loved training a certain way. So it took a long time. Eventually, I was able to completely embrace higher frequency. So if I can get in and I can get that activation, I can get that trigger for growth and get all the growth factors and the recovery, all of that, and not beat the muscle to death and then let it recover and then come back and do it again as soon as possible. The more times I can do that, if I can do that twice a week, that's like 104 times per year if I trained every week versus 52, So it's like, okay, yeah, maybe this makes more sense. And that was thanks to Scott and all his talk about higher frequency, which at first was a completely foreign concept. Like the first time I tried DC training, I wasn't ready for it, and all I did was hurt myself. Yeah. But down the road, it made sense to get the most out of the least, just like everything else we do in bodybuilding. With gear, most out of the least. Yeah. Training, get the most out of the least. If I can, get my back to grow with less weight and make that weight harder, then don't add an extra plate and risk hurting my back. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, that would be one thing I would say, and that's just been. It wasn't one distinct moment. It was just having a relationship with somebody who just allowed me to learn it on my own by listening to him.
Yeah, an interesting thing with that I've seen since I've been lifting weights is, and none of these guys will say that it's all the same, but essentially at the root it is. Like HIIT training, basically is DC training, basically is Scott's training, basically is.
I've heard you say that before.
Ken Leisner's training, and it's all the basic principles are kind of the same. Yeah. Dorian Yates. Yeah. Right? So it's kind of all Edgar Garden. It's all the same. And the one interesting thing that I've seen over the years is you'll find people that will train, say all that Dorian training or pick any of them, all that training for a period of time, then they start doing like high volume training, like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yes. I'm growing like crazy. Yes. And you'll find the other. They'll do a high volume training for a long period of time, then they'll start doing this other one, like, oh my God, this is amazing, I'm growing like crazy. And as somebody that's coming from a strength programming world, I'm like, variation matters. Like, have you just adapted yourself to, after 5 years, the higher volume?
Yeah,
so
and that's exactly what Scott's theory has been. With the people who got into HIIT, when when Menser was talking about it, they were all doing Schwarzenegger training, and then all of a sudden they were probably overtrained from this long period of time, and now they're dialing it way back. And it's like, yeah, it makes total sense. So I'm totally with you on that, and that opened my eyes. And so from there, then that developed into like, okay, well, what if we have a higher frequency training, but on one day we do, because then I went to progressive,
yes,
and then I beat myself into the ground with it. Well, it's like, well, what if I do progressive and then what I would call like a volume day? How would that work in comparison? I'm still hitting it twice a week, you know what I mean, or more. We'll say not even twice a week, but more frequently. What will that do? So to start opening my eyes to like these different variations.
Well, how to phase it throughout a year.
Yeah.
So just hypothetically, right, in a higher calorie phase, you're going to have the higher volume because you have the glycogen to be able to support all that. Where if it's going to be a lower calorie phase where there's lower glycogen, you're going to go the other route. I'm just throwing shit to the wind, but having a phasic structure, which that's one thing that bodybuilding always kind of lacked to me.
I agree, because like I didn't get that, and I know that's where you guys excel. Like that's something I feel like I could really learn from powerlifting. Like with your guy, and you guys call it programming. We call it. People in bodybuilding call it what we do programming now, but I don't think that it's to the level of what you guys.
And it will be because it already. I mean, you're already manipulating the cardio with the nutrition.
Yeah.
A lot, like a whole lot, because normally if somebody's a diet coach, what are the two variables that they're doing?
Yeah, diet.
Cardio, that's it. Like,
or nutrition.
The cardio, nutrition, that's it. They're not usually doing anything with the training at all, for the most part. But that, so, and I get it, because do you really want to take on that next step too? Yeah. Because how much time do you really have? To be able to devote? But all those variables, how they operate, is interesting, and I've been waiting for this, to be honest. I've been waiting for this higher intensity, low volume to come back around. It's been a while, right? It's been this high volume thing for a long ass time.
It really has.
It's like, it's about time, it's like, when's this going to shift? And right when I think it's going to shift, it becomes like all biomechanical based, right? It's like all these new ones have come up that weren't there before. It used to just be high volume, low volume. Yeah. Now it's like mechanical based and evidence based, which, the evidence based is very interesting to me, because you can take Scott and you can take, diehard HIIT training people, and they'll throw evidence on a table that you can't believe to support everything that they're talking about, where the high volume people will do the same thing. Absolutely. And then as practitioners or coaches, we're like, the fuck? Yeah. Like, what does this even mean?
Yeah, at the end of the day, the studies, all of that, I appreciate it, and I enjoy looking at that stuff, but I really want to impress on people that is not the be-all, end-all, that there's a difference between reading a study and what actually is going to work for you, everybody being individual, too. My big issue, though, because it is swinging back to HIIT, I think, but my big issue with it is I'm seeing a lot of younger people that don't understand the intensity it takes to actually get everything you need. That we do the top set, back off set, and I see people who send a vid, because I'll have my clients send videos, and they really are doing their best. But we talked about this on our shows. Like, intensity is something that constantly evolves as we train, and some people just aren't there yet. When I tried DC training the first time, I just wasn't there yet, and for that, maybe volume might be a better place. But you have guys that literally have no development. They're doing a top set, back off set, and their top set does not look like, it's not even close to where we want it. So I think that there's a problem with that. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think some of that is they don't know how to utilize the muscle that they're actually training. So if I'm trying to think of an exercise as a good example. If I'm showing somebody a dumbbell press and I want to do them like a bodybuilder, right? At the bottom position, they should feel a stretch in their pecs, not their shoulders, their pecs. And then they should initiate it. You know how we can bounce our tips, right? They should initiate it with that contraction of the pec, control the tempo to be able to flex it at the top. And then when they flex it to the top, not really feel their triceps flexing hard.
Right.
While they will, and so will your biceps, but you feel that tension.
Yeah, I tell them to try to keep it in the pec, and a lot of times if I'm trying to get somebody to feel the chest, I'll tell them, like, don't even lock out. And I'll have people start from the bottom, because I feel like what I see a lot is people with that movement will start from the top with dumbbells, and then they just, you're in Ohio, have you been to Cedar Point?
Oh yeah.
Remember the demon drop? Just the demon drop, straight down and hit the chest and then bounce right back up. Whereas if I start from the bottom, and this was taught to me by another guy who's been on our podcast, Big Dave Smith, was that if you can, what I got out of it at least, is that if you can engage a compound movement with that target muscle, then you're going to get more out of that exercise for the muscle you're trying to grow.
And there may be reasons to do both, but to have the ability to do both, I think, is important if you're going to start talking about intensity and training something to failure.
What do you mean do both?
To be able to do to train a movement with muscular control like we're talking about, or to just muscle fuck them. Right. Because if we're going to talk about training to failure, it's one thing to do no tempo, dumbbell presses of I want you to fail somewhere between 10 and 15, right? And all you're doing is just flexing them up like it's a heavy compound movement without that muscular control. With muscular control, you might need, instead of 100 pounds, 60 pounds. And you could fail, I could tell you with your experience, I want you to fail between 6 and 8.
Right.
And after the first one, you're gonna be like, fuck, this is really easy. I need to slow down. I need to flex harder.
Right.
You're gonna find a way to fail there.
It's gonna be
those are
ugly set.
You get what I'm saying? But those are two different training qualities. So when somebody says, I want you to train to failure, but you don't know this quality, but you only know this one, then that failure becomes a whole different thing, because then is actually training to failure on the dumbbell press even a good idea? Right?
That's a great way. That's a great way of looking at it.
Same with a lat pull down. Like if the lat pull down before you start, you should feel it in your lats, like not your shoulders. So if you feel that lat stretch, then you pull down and contract. You might. My point is, I try to teach people the ability to do both. Okay. Right. So you can do it in a ballistic fashion. But you should also acquire the skill to do it in a controlled fashion. Right.
So in bodybuilding, let me ask you then. Let's say you're trying to grow your back. We're doing a pull down. Is that all in the same set? Are you beginning that set with activation and going to ballistic at the end, or what are you saying? Like where's the?
You could put it all in the same training session,
or maybe you're doing like one exercise one way, one another, or maybe one phase of training you're doing it one way then the other.
I think as a beginner learning to try to acquire that ability, they should do both. Maybe not. Maybe this exercise this, and then this exercise would be more loose. But they should try to learn to acquire that skill as you become more advanced. When I was training with John and stuff like that, maybe some exercises earlier on are going to be done a little bit more ballistic. Well, after you're warmed up, some exercises are done a little bit more ballistically. Then you start to target in what you want to do, because at the higher levels, when you can actually see which fibers are with John, you can see everything. Right. It's all paper thin. Then simple tweaks can make a big difference. On what you see actually contracting. That's not, those simple tweaks and that contraction that you see is not going to happen on a ballistic movement. It's going to have to be somewhat controlled for that. But having that muscle control, I believe, even carries through to a power lifter, because if they're having a hard time locking out if they're having a hard time locking out the bench, for instance, and I want them to try to basically spread the bar to be able to help with the lockout, or squeeze the pinkies, anything to be able to engage that tricep a little bit more. They need to know what the tricep flexing feels like. To be able to do that in the first place, where it still becomes more, and I think with a strength athlete, the ability to be able to learn how to train that the way that I'm speaking about with low-end accessories on the training day, fourth exercise, fifth exercise, do they really need to do 60-pound side raises?
Right.
Or could they just do the fucking 15s with better control?
Right.
And actually, they'll probably get more out of the 15s with better control. So I call it like training like a bodybuilder.
Okay.
Like, so train like a bodybuilder on this, because the joint wear and tear is still the joint wear and tear. Right. So and if you do this, then instead of needing 4 sets, you can probably accumulate enough muscle damage in the 2, because at the end of the day, and this is some of the stuff that's coming out in studies now, it's the effective reps in a training plan. So if the tricep only needs 12 effective reps, you know, in a week, or say 20 effective reps in a week, well, what's an effective rep? The first 6 probably aren't. Maybe it's only the last 3 before you get to failure.
Depending on how advanced you are, you know, maybe it's that last 1.
So now you could have all those effective reps in one day, or it could be split and then it's in 2 days, right? So I try to look at, when you look at those 2 different philosophies, what's common amongst both of those? Which reps really make the biggest difference? The first ones or the last ones?
Of course, the last,
Yeah, and then which exercises make the biggest difference? It's just kind of looking at things from a broader view, like how much is, because I assume most of what we do in the gym is junk. Right, so how much of this is just junk? Right, and I'm not just so much junk. Maybe it's stuff that needs to happen to start to begin to accumulate the fatigue to allow what's really going to need to be necessary to develop strength or hypertrophy. Right, but can that be done in a different way that would be less dense? You know, or with less work or less joint wear and tear. Like the more effective dose.
Absolutely.
Right? And at the same time realizing that people's personality types are different. You know, people that are just new into training, that love training, they are going to train like fucking animals for a while.
They are.
So how do you do that without fucking them all up? You know, so how you control that? Because at the same time, you don't want to tell them not to, because they're just going to go do it somewhere else. It's like a high school coach telling their high school kids, don't bench press. You can't bench press in here. You don't, especially in today's world where everybody has a home gym, you don't think they're maxing out at their buddy's house
all the time.
All the time, you know. So it becomes the whole training thing is a fascinating world to me, because there obviously, this is what blows my mind. Obviously, there's different ways to get to the top, right? And yes, I get genetics play a role. Right, I get that. But I also think that we all forget that just you being in the sport, you're a genetic outlier yourself. Just being in this, look at the population in whole. If most of the population can't bench 100 pounds.
Is that the number?
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
Because there is a number like that.
There probably is a number if I looked it up. But most of the population say can't bench 100 pounds. If you can, and then that makes you like the bottom 10% of bodybuilders or powerlifters.
Right.
Somebody can say you're a genetic outlier.
Absolutely.
Right. So now we're dealing with varying degrees of genetic outliers. You see what I'm saying here? So they all kind of are. So with all that, you look and it's like, okay, what fits, what doesn't fit in going that route?
I'm fascinated by the amount that you know, like what you know about training is at a level that I honestly can't completely comprehend. Like,
why?
You've spent so much time just focusing on just training. Like with bodybuilding, I feel like I may have ignored training early on, and I thought of training as just being the thing you did. Like I loved it, don't get me wrong, but like you just bench pressed, you just pulled down, you just barbell rowed, you just deadlift, you squat.
Well, that goes what I was saying earlier. You know, it's this component of that sport. It's one component of many.
But that like was such like to me for a long time, and I think for a lot of people, it's just like in bodybuilding, we don't focus on anything further than that, because you can dive so deep into the drugs or so deep into the food, and you know, and you can get a lot out of it that way too. Like I can just train really hard and keep it real, you know, real vanilla, and then really focus on my food, and you might be able to get ahead
to some level for a while by doing that. And it wasn't until I needed to that I actually started looking at the training. If I was like, well, why didn't my back grow? Then I must be doing something wrong. Or that chest thing, you know, it was like, it just was, you've spent a lot more time seriously focused on training. It's just, it honestly is a level that my brain, I'm sure, can't.
Yeah. Well,
can't
at the end of the day, it
comprehend.
still ends up being individual, right? Because every bodybuilder at the top has a different program.
Yeah.
Right. Every powerlifter at the top has a different program. So you can't say this program's better than this program. If everybody at the top has something that's been auto-regulated to the point that's become their own program. Absolutely. The key takeaway is, well, what are you doing to be able to auto-regulate everything to the point that it becomes your program?
That's the answer.
Right. Well, it is. And that's a hard thing to get people to wrap their head around.
Well, and that goes back to, like, everybody wants a simple black and white answer, and there isn't one for any of it, really. Whether it be the drugs or the nutrition, definitely the training, you know? That, and I do think that, the volume, it worked great for me for a time, you know, like it worked really good for a time. But it took more to figure that out down the road.
Yeah. And I believe there's also psychological aspects to that too. So if you take somebody that thrives on certainty, they kind of want to have the program be the same a lot.
And that's what I had an issue with, was because if I went to higher frequency, that might mean that every Wednesday isn't back day now.
Yes.
You know, and that I didn't have my workout set up the way but it takes, I guess, being uncomfortable enough or wanting it enough to be willing to try something different.
Now, what if that stresses you out all the time, though? Because now that stress is producing cortisol, now you're not going to be able to recover because of your own mental stress, because you can't wrap your head around the fact that things are different every time you go in the gym.
I talked to this woman, Kate D'Annunzio, and she specializes in change.
Yes.
And like, she goes into businesses and she works with companies and teaches them how to embrace change. And we did a couple podcasts together, and that was another person I learned a lot from. And she talked a lot about resiliency. That the people who are the most resilient are the people that are the most successful, the people that can just adapt. And so I feel like if you know that, then that's helped me, because I've been somebody who has really embraced my schedules and my stability. But then when I get challenged by that, I'll stop and I'll go, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for me to practice resiliency.
And I believe
you know
that
what I mean?
100%. You know, it's through adversity comes prosperity is the one thing that I've always said is you have to lean into adversity, but by no means you go out and create your own. Which, you know, some people though that do thrive on uncertainty will create uncertainty.
Sure.
You know, just by the nature of what it is. But you don't want to not lean into where an issue is going to be, because it's an opportunity to become stronger at what that is. Yeah. And if everything, and I guess you know, parents worry about that with their kids. You know, there's a balance. You know, how soft you want to make their world, right? Because if you protect them from everything, then they get out to the real world. You know, a hard time for somebody is only the hardest time they've ever had. Yeah. Right? Now, what if their hardest time they've ever had is their soup was cold? Right? I mean, the real world don't work like that. You know, so you got to. We're all like that. Yeah. So the more adverse conditions you've been through, it becomes easier to handle the next one. The next one, and then the next one. And one of the things I had in here, because you've been around for so long, that on the message boards and the forums and all that kind of stuff, you go back far enough, you know, criticism probably bothered you a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, earlier on. And still today. Like, it doesn't ever stop, I think, bothering me.
But the way that you see it has changed.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Where that's a great example kind of what we're talking about here is, you know, if you're new to it and somebody will make a post and it's like, oh, you're some random troll ass account says something bad, that can wreck somebody's day. It's
that could make you stop posting if you see that early enough. You know,
this isn't even yes, it's probably, hell, it may be a bot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could be,
Yeah.
but it's not even a person. Like, if we're having this podcast right now, you know, there could be people watching this that are talking amongst their friends, like, these guys are fucking dickheads.
Yeah.
Do we even care?
Yeah.
Because we don't hear it.
Right.
You know, we don't hear it, we don't see it, but just because we may see it by an account by somebody that we don't even know, all of a sudden we're supposed to get upset about that.
Yeah.
Where maybe 15 years ago you do, but now it's like, whatever. Actually, now it's engagement.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck yeah. Comment all the bad shit that you want on this video.
Yeah.
Just comment like make fucking 400 bad comments. Do it, because it just pushes it. It gives us engagement.
Yeah.
You know, do it. So it's how that changes, you know. So, but people, you've gotten, if you were to go back now, and if you still might even be able to do this with some of those forums, it'd take a little while, a little digging, go back to look at some of the things that would have made you mad 12 years ago, the exact statement, and I bet you laugh at it now.
Yeah, I could see that. I can even think of even a few years back. Like it's a process I think everybody has to go through over time, you know, with being okay with it. And I think maybe part of what maybe had upset me earlier on would be, you know, sometimes it would be somebody that I would just be like, oh man, this is one of my peers that's saying this. And then in reality, most of the time, the people who are trolling you, they just don't have anything better to do. You know, like I came to the realization that the people who are further along than I am and are doing better than I am aren't really going out of their way to knock me. You know, it's people that are below that generally want to do that, and I'll still get it to this day. You know, it was not on my podcast, but on somebody else's podcast. Somebody had commented in the last several months, like, why does anybody want to listen to Scott McNally, a defunct warehouse worker who started coaching people? You know, it's like, whatever. You know, I'm like, well, who are you? Because I worked when I came back to Michigan after photography, and I got in recovery and all that. And even before recovery, like, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I just took a blue collar job, and I started bodybuilding. So yeah, I worked in a warehouse for a while, and I did. And he doesn't have to listen to me. I guess that's the end of the day.
I know, but look at the context of that statement. Don't listen to a guy that's a recovering addict that was in such a bad spot that he had to work in a defunct warehouse position, but now he's worked himself to the ability to be able to coach and help other people. Don't listen to that person.
Yeah.
Who should you listen to? The person that just had a cush life, got a college degree, has no practical experience, doesn't know the real world, hasn't had the hard knocks, but you want to listen to them?
Yeah.
Who do you... That's a compliment, man.
Yeah.
Without them even knowing that, that's a compliment.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right? So it's how you frame it.
Yeah, it really is.
If I was in that position, I would think, fuck yes, dude.
Well, the way I've always looked at it is, if I see somebody who's risen up and done more with their life, like that says to me that that's possible. It's all in how we view things, you know? Like, I look at what you've done here, and like, when I learned, like I said, that you've done this to support education, and I look at this amazing gym, and man, you know, like, I knew about Elite for a long time, you know, decade plus, and to think that this has all been something that you've done out of your passion, I don't think to myself, like, fucking Dave's got all these nice bars over here, and how does he get all this shit? I'm like, holy shit, that's possible. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah. I mean, the truth of it is, if I was to sit down and explain to everybody all the bullshit, then they wouldn't want to follow the path that I did. I guarantee that. No fucking way would they want to. I mean, how many people would be willing to work for 6 years with no pay?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how many would be willing to have a prosperous year, but yet you still couldn't pay yourself? You know, so there's so many things that people just don't see.
Yeah.
Even with what you do.
Yeah.
And I can prove this statement with 100% certainty to anybody that's listening to this. The life that you lead, how many things do you do each day that people think that you're in a better position than what you really are in, but they have no idea what you've had to go through to be where you are?
Yeah.
No matter where you are.
That comment, by the way, that I mentioned, I forgot the term. He said, while he cashes in.
Cashes in
on the bodybuilding world, you know, and I'm thinking like I'm cashing in here, you know, like just trying to make a living, you know. That's
well, that's the assumption that no matter what, if you have your own business, you make $250,000 a year.
Cashing in.
That's the assumption everybody makes.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's interesting where that whole thing, you know, how that works.
And there's a whole movement now too of people who will attack you to raise their own credibility. You know, that's a thing now. Skip and I were recently talking about that, about like how, you know, there's controversy. There can be healthy, like he was talking about, like, because Skip, believe it or not, Skip would be confrontational sometimes.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I was being sarcastic. You know, but we're talking about the difference between like a healthy controversy or like just trying to hurt somebody. You know what I mean? Because there's people out there that'll try to hurt you to just make themselves look better.
But does it? Think about it. Think it through.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they get you more followers at the end of the day.
Well, it is, but I mean, are those the followers that you want?
Well, the people that are then, they learn about you and they're like, hey, this guy's all right. Absolutely. You know, those are the followers you want. And then the people who don't, the people who want to listen to that, because I think the people who listen to those people are also kind of stuck in a negative place and they're feeding off the negativity and that's what they want. And yeah, we don't want those people. I feel like we have a really good community. That's what I freaking love about what we do, is like our community is awesome. I know your community is awesome too. Like you guys are supportive people to each other, you know? And it's like, that to me is the best thing. Like our Facebook group that we have is a small group, but we have like, everybody is positive in it. Everybody has nice things to say. You don't have to worry about posting something unless you're really dumb and unless you do something real asinine, you know. It's like you're gonna at least, you know, people are gonna be at least polite to you.
What is the Facebook group?
It's just Think Big Bodybuilding Media. It's a private group.
Yeah.
And like I said, we put the shows up live there. It's kind of cool because I just wanted a place where I could post the shows on Facebook, even though Facebook's outdated now. And now we have enough people there that are kind of, they start their own post and then they'll ask questions there and stuff too. And the community helps each other out. And you know, they'll talk about like supplements from companies that we work with and stuff like that. So it's cool that has, you know, it's related to the podcast. Yeah. But there's a lot of people on there kind of doing their own thing now. Yes. And that's been an extension of, you know, the shows.
See, I think those groups, we have a Discord group for the Tabletalk.
I gotta get on Discord.
You know, those groups are, it's interesting because they're not like the forums. Yeah. Right? Where the forums were like a different thing, right? Where these groups are kind of like what old gym culture used to be like. Like you go into one of the gyms when you first started training, right? And there's cliques. Yeah. You know, like the more serious people and the other people. I mean, you're still part of the community of the gym when you go in there. But then there's cliques. And for you to you had to earn your way into a certain clique. But you're still invited and everybody, you know, it's still a very cool place to be in. Yeah. But that clique really wasn't always the best lifters, or they were just people that have kind of proven that they give a fuck at a different level, right? Yeah, yeah. Where it seems like with these groups and these communities like that, you could stick an expert in there, right? Say, man, I want to put this person in here to be able to give better advice. They don't give a fuck until that person proves that they care. Yeah. You know that, and
yeah, that is so true, isn't it?
Right. So you could take somebody, you know, genius nutritionist X without using any names, pop them in your group. Nobody's going to give a fuck. Yeah. They're not going to oh, he's here, I'm going to start asking him questions now because of why he's there. Yeah. They're like, nah, fuck it. He's got to work his way and kind of earn. You see what I'm saying? It's a weird thing. Yeah. Forums weren't like that. Yeah. Right. And actually, other social media has not been like that. These group things it's a different thing for me. I'm like, I like it. Yeah. Like I kind of like it.
It's a little more personal, you know, than just like your own Facebook wall or whatever. It's definitely more personal than like if you make an Instagram post.
It's more community. Yeah, I guess, it is. For being digital, it's almost like the most close to community that I've seen.
We got to get into Discord. I know that that's the place to be. I just haven't done it yet, but it sounds like you guys are doing really good with that, huh?
Well, it's controlled, you know what I'm saying, because it's behind a paywall, right? So that keeps bullshit out because of that too. But I didn't want to go with the Facebook group for a couple reasons, because our Facebook page got hacked and I'm still trying to figure out how to get that all back. But I don't know how popular Facebook even is with people anymore, because when our page got hacked and this whole last quarter, or Q4 and Q1, I haven't run ads, I haven't done anything on Facebook, and it's made zero difference.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, this doesn't even matter, but yet I was paying them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so now this is fucked up. Like, I was paying them, it doesn't matter how many people are actually on it, or is it really just old fucking people now? Is it just everybody over 40, nobody else is on it? Yeah. And if that's the case, I don't want to pop this on here, because then people would be less inclined to want to be able to become a member of that. Yeah. Where Discord was a little bit different risk, because who the fuck knows what it is? I didn't know what it is. Yeah. You know, who knows what it is? And I didn't want to go the Patreon route because I didn't know it that well, and I don't know if the community aspect can really be the same.
Yeah, so I'm building Patreon now. Yeah. And I've got a good little group there. And I'll do extra little bonus stuff for them, and then like Victoria and I are planning on doing another like Q&A just for Patreon people. So it has a similar feel. Like our Facebook group is free. It's private, so that you can post about gear and you don't have to worry about your boss finding out. But yeah, the Patreon it's still smaller, but that's what I'm working toward, developing that as being more of our private place to be.
Does it have a community type thing? Kind of like that group?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I can post there. The only thing is other people can't make their own posts in your Patreon. So it's kind of like you can post, they can comment, so you can generate conversation, and then they can ask. Like, so I'll use, like for our shows, I'll say, hey guys, you know, here's a question thread. Post up questions for any of the shows. Let me know what show you want it on. And then when I go to record, I just make sure I go over to Patreon and go to that thread, and I'm like, okay, here's 3 for Blood, Sweat, and Gear. Make sure to get those on the show today. Yeah. You know, that kind of thing. And, you know, I get good feedback, and I have, you know, a huge level of appreciation, because those people they care enough that they're like willing to give $5-10 to the programming. They know like what we're doing, and it means enough to them. So like I have a special connection to those guys, I think, especially because it's cool to me. Like it's humbling to even think. Like, I know the amount of time I put in. Like Victoria, my wife, if there's anybody who knows the amount of time I put in, it's her. And if there's anybody who would rather I put in less, it's her. But she also understands. But it's like, these people, I think, are the next level of people who get it, you know. And I really like that. It's just, you know, it's nice to be appreciated, right?
Well, when it's something like, at least with ours, when it's something like that, if I go there for a question call out for a podcast, I'm going to listen full-heartedly. Yeah. Because they're vested in the podcast doing better. Right. You know, or if it's a guest, they're vested. I'm going to listen. I'm going to want to try to really work to get the guests that they're looking for, because they're vested in wanting to see it do better. Yeah. You know, so it's more leaning into that. I lean more into that now than I do the Instagram, which I used to. Yeah. Because how do I know exactly that these people are vested in it and wanting to do that?
I found, like, with something like that, sometimes those Instagram people don't even end up watching.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Yes. But it's more people, so it's still marketing.
And it is, and then sometimes too, they might think of something you wouldn't have thought to ask. You know, if they had a good question or something. Yes. And if the way I look at it too is, if one person's asking a question, that there's a lot of times multiple people that would want to hear that answer. You know what I mean? Yes. So I always try to remember that too. Like, a big part of what we do is the Q&A thing, and I think that's good it works good for us. And some of the stuff I've learned about podcasting just in general is that, you know, it's like, you know, if you have a team, if you're part of a team, you don't really feel like you're part of the team if you're just sitting on the bench, you know. But if you get the ball once you get the ball, then you feel like you're part of the team, you know. And that really is part of it, is being able to answer questions for people. You're making them
part of the show. And that's, I think, what's different than like what radio used to be, or like the old Hollywood is. Back then, you had just celebrities that were untouchable. And if you're lucky, you might get an autograph and a, hey, how's it going? And that's it. But like, you can reach out to Dave Tate. You can talk to Dave Tate. Hell, Dave Tate might answer your question on his podcast. Like, it's a different world today. And that's, I think, what's so alluring to what we do is it's our shows, but it's really their part of it just as much as we are.
What are some of the most popular questions you get asked?
Man, I mean, it really a lot of, like, with depends on the show, drugs and stuff, all steroids, you know.
I know, but even with that, like, what context?
I would say just people want to understand compounds and dosing and how does this cycle look? Is there anything you do different here? People want to ask about, you know, newer compounds that are being used, like the GLP-1 agonists. That's a real popular one now. Like, everybody wants to learn about semaglutide. We're going to talk about that pretty soon on Blood, Sweat, and Gear. And then Blood, Sweat, and Gear, people ask a lot of questions related to prep. Like, they might want to know about, like, how do you do water manipulation, or you know, they might ask drug questions as well, but it'd be like, what about using these compounds in a contest prep, or, you know, what about, like, how do you manage cardio? Here's a recent one, was like, how do you manage your training intensity during a prep? You know, how does that work? So
what is the answer to that?
I mean, the answer is always, it depends, first of all. But then we might give out some hypotheticals, and Skip might come up with, you know, well, in this situation, this is what I've done, or this is what, you know, these are the factors here, and then here's the way that you would, here's the things you could look at and try. Or like a lot of questions about, like, loading, you know, like about, like, loading for a show or cheat meals, stuff like that, you know, and how often to have a cheat meal, you know, that kind of thing.
But how do you answer that? Because it is always going to factor into, it depends, right?
Yeah.
Are people going to pick their coaches based upon how many cheat meals the coach is going to allow?
I bet some do, yeah. I mean, how would I answer the cheat meal question?
Yeah.
I would say what I would do. And what my thought would be is that, you know, so there's two purposes, in my opinion, for a cheat meal. One is going to be because your body needs to load, and we're going to need more than just using some clean food. That's one purpose. The other purpose for a cheat meal is the mental break. If you're not in a prep, we can take a mental break a lot sooner than if you're in a prep.
How would they know their body needs to load?
And then I would get into that. You know, we talk about, like, well, what does it mean to get depleted? And that's something I try to explain to clients too, because especially if they've never prepped before, I'll tell them, like, okay, what we're going to try to do here is get you into a depleted state. The quicker we can do that, the faster we're going to get into a fat loss state. And, you know, we're going to try to reduce the food. We're going to get you to the point where your pumps probably aren't going to be as good. Mm-hmm. Your workouts aren't going to be as good. You know, you might start feeling a little bit less energy. This is okay. You know, you might start looking flat. You're not going to stretch your t-shirt sleeves out anymore. That's okay. This is what we want, and that all will come back. So we're talking real basic, right?
Yeah, I call that the fugly face.
Yeah. Where you're still fat, but you're not ripped yet. You know, you're still fat. You're not, but now you're flat. Yeah, mm-hmm. and you know, we're going to get you into that, and when we get you to that spot, we're going to get you into fat burning from there, and when that slows down, then we're going to need to give you some sort of food, some sort of additional load, you know, and that's where potentially a cheat meal could come in, you know. But then I try to remind people too, like, hey, you know, those meals are always going to be there, and just try to remember, what are your goals, and let's try to look at food as, you know, the fuel for these goals. These are our tools, and I swear, McDonald's is not going to close. Like, it will be there after the prep, or even your birthday. You're going to have more birthdays. There's going to be more Thanksgivings, like if it really came down to that. Otherwise, I try to give people those accommodations. You know, it's very rare that I tell somebody you can't have Thanksgiving dinner. You know, but you know, and then once we get you there, then we're going to give you maybe a fixed meal. Like I might do, if it was a cheat meal, we might do, like, one of my favorites is just like a burger and fries, good quality. Skip uses the term restaurant quality burger, and I like that. Like a good quality burger, not McDonald's and fries. And I feel like, to me, I call that like a middle of the road cheat meal. And then we're going to check in the next day and see what happens, see what you look like, and then watch how you respond. You know, if we get it too early you know, it's just gonna load you back up, and you know, we're gonna be back to where we started. A lot of times I'd tell somebody, but you know, if we can get you moving along and get you making progress, that cheat meal might actually speed process up. So we're gonna need more time, and then there's a level of trust, you know, with that. Now, can somebody employ that based off of what I just said? You know, possibly. They're going to have to still figure it out for themselves, but I gave them a lot of ideas around it, you know, to try to figure it out.
The ballpark it, or at least to be able to vet out other content.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the key thing is when there's like we talked earlier, like an overabundance of content. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because the more voices can drown out the shitty voices, right? But it shouldn't. If we're doing a good job educating, it should be pretty easy for somebody to knock out the bottom 25% of bullshit real quick.
Yeah.
Like, it just looks like, if it looks and sounds like bullshit, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? So they can knock out a lot of it really fast.
And that's one of the things I really enjoy about what we do as a network, is that we have, you know, these several different shows, but if you listen to all of them, not everybody's going to have the same answer, but we're kind of all in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
And when you hear somebody say something that kind of resonates with what somebody else said and somebody else said and somebody else said, we're all more or less on the same page. And I think sometimes hearing multiple people tell you the same thing is helpful. And I bet you guys have that too, because you have so many voices through Elite. And if you just go through all of that, like, I would rather listen to multiple people and then filter that for myself than just trust one, you know what I mean? And then from there be able to kind of create my own ideas based off of having read a lot of stuff.
You know, with technique training and any of the main lifts, you know, there's, if you want to talk about bracing of the core or rooting of the feet or whatever it's going to be, you'll find multiple people explaining it a dozen different ways.
Yeah.
Which will confuse the shit out of anybody that's following it until you ask yourself, what's the end goal of all of them? The end goal is always the same. So the message might be different, but if the end goal is the same, then it doesn't matter. You do the one that clicks with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not the right. In other words, people can explain things in different ways.
Right.
Right. And sometimes your way might be too biomechanical. Sometimes it might be too meathead.
Right.
Sometimes it might be too PhD level. Sometimes it might be whatever. It's just doesn't click. It could be you're wrong, or you just simply are the wrong messenger.
Yeah, right.
They don't like the way you look.
Yeah.
They don't like the way you talk. Whatever it's going to be, you know. So that's why the more voices is always a good thing. When people assume that their voice is the only voice, then there's a problem for all those things that I just said. People just simply may not like the way you talk.
Yeah.
So they're not going to pay attention.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and that's exactly what I've tried to do. So it takes more patience to learn that way, because you're not going to tune in and hear the be all end all black and white answer. And we'll say it all the time on the show, so there is no real black and white, you know. But if you are invested enough, if you listen enough, if you come back and you continually hear all these different people and their thoughts, then you're going to be able to form a better opinion based off of other people's thoughts than just listening to the one, for sure.
Yeah. Were there any topics that you want to talk about that I didn't bring up?
Man, I think we've covered just so much here. I mean, I could go all day. We could talk even more about. I could go further about podcasting, talk further about training. I can't think of anything though that like.
What if somebody wanted? Because right now podcasting is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Right? What if somebody wanted to start their podcast? What would be the simple advice that you'd have? Just start fresh.
To start fresh, I would think, you know, what I would first ask myself, because you don't need a lot of equipment. I think the first thing people would think of is like, well, what camera do I need and stuff like that. Let's look at the idea. Like, what are you actually going to offer? You know, I think that's the first thing you need to think of. And then I think you need to continue making sure that the focus is always about that we get away from it. I think that there's so many podcasts out there now where the main focus is like, well, what did I have for breakfast? And, you know, like me, you know, but what can you do for somebody else? How can you, because here's the thing is, and I heard there's this book called Superfans that was really good that I read, and it's about developing basically listenership, and you want to basically you want to give somebody a $10 bill. Basically is what it comes down to. So everybody's out there giving out information in our field, right? And if you walk down the street, Dave, and you found $1 on the ground, you probably would pick it up because it's a buck and you put it in your pocket. But you probably wouldn't tell everybody all day you found $1 bill. But if you were to find a 10 or a 20, you probably tell people holy shit, I found a 20.
Yeah.
And that's kind of you want to be able to give people a 20 every time that you do a podcast, then, because if you can do that, then we can create a reverse funnel. We're talking about the funnel earlier. We're a reverse funnel where we're the one, and that one spreads. And that's really what we have on our side is being able to what do they call that? Grassroots.
Yes.
Is really what we do. And so if you want to have a show and grow, then offer somebody something, whatever that is. And in my case, I offered people the thing that I wanted myself. And I thought to myself, if I want this, then I know there's going to be other people out there that want this too. And over time, that's developed because I've learned a lot, in the last 10 years, 8 years of podcasting. I've learned a ton, and so now it's developed more into being able to just share myself more and share what I've learned more over this time. But that would be the key focus, and the rest of those pieces are going to fall into place. You can have a crappy microphone, you can have a crappy camera, and if you provide that great value, then people will come back, and you can always improve and start today. Get that idea and do it, because so many people, just like with competing, I'm not ready yet. I have a client, shout out to Kyle. He wants to compete, and he's wanted to compete for a long time. And he was saying well, we'd been in kind of a little cruise phase here for a while, and he's put on a ton of muscle. He's 240 now, and I think he was 200 if I want to recall when we started working together a year ago. And he's decently lean at that. And he's well, should I put on more muscle? And the truth is, yes, he should. He needs to be bigger. But he was I really want to compete, but should we do another push first? And I broke it down. I was well, if you're going to compete this year and we do another push and it's already February, that's going to be February, March, April. Then we're going to take a couple months off. Now we're going to have to really struggle to get you ready for November. So why don't we just start now? Because at the end of the day, how much were you really going to grow in that first little chunk, in that little chunk of off season anyway? You've put on all this size. We know that you're not going to be your ultimate best, but the key is getting out there and just doing it. And once you do that, you got the first one under your belt, then you can keep going. And then the other thing would be is if you decide to do a podcast and you want to basically outline what you're going to do. And if you're going to do it once a month, tell people you're doing it once a month. If you're going to do it once a week, tell them. But then honor that, because you're literally entering into an unwritten contract with your listener. And if you break that contract, then you've lied to them and you've broken trust. So don't break trust. I had to put a podcast out this morning. I had to edit it, get it going. I got part of it edited last night. I crossed my fingers that the Holiday Inn Wi-Fi was good enough to upload a 6 gig file, and it was. And I got a show out, before I came out here to see you. So it's it was important to me though that I honored my agreement with my people. So if you follow those things, then it'll just keep getting better. Always provide value, good value, and always continue putting it out and start now.
Now the follow-up question is going to come with that is, well, how do you monetize it?
What do you want to do? My number one thought would be, well, what do you want to market? What do you have to offer? I think that I would be doing really well if I already owned a supplement company. You know what I mean? If I had a supplement company or something and I was pimping that, then I'd be doing great, But I don't, it's I market my coaching. So there's that.
I get YouTube revenue, which is something we've talked about on my show. Like, you're not necessarily going to count on any one of these sources. And then I work with several different supplement companies and sponsors that, help us. I don't like using this word sponsor. I've been trying to get that out of my vocab. I like advertiser. Well, I say advertiser because they are advertising. Sponsors kind of like, well, they just giving you money.
Yeah.
Like, no, I really work for it, honestly. We do commercials, and I make sure that I put them in the light that I believe they deserve, and I make them part of the show. So you can get advertisers, all of that. But really, it just comes down to that. That is the next step, is like, well, what are you going to offer? I think a lot of people are doing it now to offer their own coaching service, which I don't think that's a bad thing, In fact, I like working with people that find me through the podcast, because if they hire me, they've already tuned in for I don't know how many hours, sometimes hundreds of hours. Like, they know the way I think. I don't have to explain as much. Like, we just plug in, we get started, and we roll. Versus if your sister's best friend comes to me, then I'm like, okay, hi, my name's Scott. I start there. Yeah. Nice to meet you. And this is what I generally do. And it's like, there's a lot that has a lot of background work that then you need to fill in. So it is a great way, if you are a coach, for getting referrals. So I will say that,
Yeah, I would put that out there. I would also say that they need to ask themselves, is it monetizable? Right? Like, so if you had a company, would you advertise on your own podcast?
Yeah.
And if that was the case, would you get a return on that? So if a company was to give you $100, then are they going to get $200 back for what they gave you? Or are they at least going to get back whatever their ROI is on that $100? And that doesn't mean $100. Yeah. Because they may have to sell $500 of product to make that $100. So that the ROI on that $100 isn't just $100, right? Yeah. It's going to be whatever they have on that. And then if the answer to that is, no, I don't, and then make it monetizable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, and that's even if it's your own service, like what you're talking about, is the content you're putting out going to be content that people are going to think, I would like to engage more with this person? Or is the content you're putting out just ego bragging and pushing people away? So it just, while it sucks to do, and I don't do it as much as I should, listen to your own podcast first. Like, record it and listen to it and say, would I advertise on that? Yeah. If
that's good advice.
Would I hire that person if you were looking for a coach? Would I hire that person? And if you don't say yes, well, then look at your show format. Yeah. And because the demographics, they do matter for big advertisers. They do matter. But even with a small demographic, if it's the right demographic and it's the right messenger, somebody with 200 followers can generate more ROI. If it's 200 followers, could be 15 more clients if it's that person.
Absolutely.
That's 15 clients is enough to almost have a full-time job. Yeah. So it's halfway there. Yeah. So there's multiple ways to look at it. Sometimes I think people think just putting it out is all you need to do.
Yeah, and I guess I skipped that part because and for me, we didn't take advertisers out the gate. And I had, when I started Advices Radio, I had the opportunity to work with a company, and they're willing to jump on board. The guy, he was like, hey, I trust you, and if you want us to advertise, I'm good with that. And I literally waited 2 years. Mm-hmm. Like, I had him in my mind that whole time. And I'll say True Nutrition, Dante. Mm-hmm. I had him in my mind the whole time. I was like, I want to work hard enough to make a show that would be worth advertising on. And when I got to that point, then I threw him out a number that I felt would be a real good deal for him, like a real good deal. Yeah. But at the same time, I was like, I know that I'm at least
going to make this not a problem for him. You know, that really was important to me. Like, for any agreement that I have with anybody, I want to make sure first and foremost that they're going to benefit out of this in some way. I would not feel good at all. Like, I wouldn't sleep at night if I was taking money from a sponsor that, like, or an advertiser.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. That I wasn't making my end of the deal.
Well, they wouldn't do it for very long either.
Yeah.
So then you don't want to have to keep switching them all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's not a good look either.
Yeah, that's true.
Any other topics, ideas?
Man, I think that's all I got. I'm just so grateful to be here. I do have one thing. I have two things, actually. I have show and tell.
Oh, shit.
So this is my Elite FTS hat.
Yeah, that's an old one. Yeah.
And I wore this hat.
It's like a dad hat.
Every day for leg day and back day. As you can tell, this used to be black. But I wore this hat.
That used to be black?
This was black.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
You don't want to touch it.
No, that's awesome.
I still will wear it. It sits in my office, but I got this years ago, and I also have a shirt that's in equal condition. That I have a certain few items of gym wear that when I put them on, this hat, that shirt, and then another Metallica Ride the Lightning shirt, and when I put those on, it's like I'm flipping a switch.
That's awesome.
You know?
I love that.
Yeah, and that's what I think when I see that hat, and that's what I think.
Don't put it on right now.
That's what I think when I think of what I've seen from you. Like, I was saying this because I was trying to make a post earlier about what about coming here, and I said to myself, as I'm writing this, I'm like, I learned about you from John.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing your videos and your training, and some of your sets are just like burned in my fucking brain. Like, and when I think of, like, if I try, because one of the things I try to do on the shows is explain what intensity is, because I want to help people get there faster. And we talked about, it's a process. And but when I think about, what intensity is, I think about some videos and you're in them. I swear to God. Like, that to me, like, you've done some stuff, some sets that don't end, and I'm like, holy shit, like, that is the goal right there. That's the top end. That's what I'm looking for. And to me, that's that. So I wanted to share that with you, that this has been one of those items, because I think about that when I put this on. And I unfortunately, man, I can't train like that right now, which is really hard for me to deal with. It's not being able to train that way. But it is one of the most special things to me, like getting in recovery and learning about bodybuilding, has been able to access that. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I got that, and I also had another question.
All right, shit.
I got to know what this is all about.
The toilet paper?
I got for anybody who's listening on audio.
Yes.
This is a question that came up to me during the Elite SWIS seminars. We came out and I got to check out the gym, and I had to take a quick piss, and then I saw some toilet paper that's literally individually wrapped. It's got the Elite logo, 1 roll Elite FTS, 3-ply and strong.
Yeah, it's multi-ply, that's for sure.
Toilet tissue.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you before, I didn't get a chance, but it's perfect time now. What is this?
The short story behind that is during lockdowns of everything. Right?
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how we can be essential. So I'm having conversations with attorneys, advisors, and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And not being in a position that closing would actually, we would probably not be here. Right, if that was the case. So it's like, okay, what is essential, what's not essential? And so we're going through all these different facets. Okay. So we were media, which was an exemption, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
that was fine anyhow. Then we I hesitantly say we sell supplements, and I only say that because we sell, like, I don't even know what's on the warehouse back there now, maybe 2 items. I mean, when I say 2 items, I mean 2 items per month, if that. like whatever it is, like just not like hundreds of each item, like 2 pieces. And so that supplements were kind of exempt.
Yeah.
And then we ordered toilet paper like as soon as we could.
Okay.
Because toilet paper is always essential because everybody's stocked out of it.
Yeah.
So we ordered a freight container. There's like 8,000 rolls of toilet paper in the warehouse, right? So I'm thinking the whole time is, A, this is funny, right? So there's that. B, it's not that expensive, right? You'd be shocked at how cheap it is, which makes you wonder like how we fucking as a country stocked out.
Yeah.
Like this is not a very expensive item. And then I'm going to have free giveaway items for forever.
Yeah.
Like, hey, make an order today, get a free roll of toilet paper.
Yeah.
And
hey, at a certain time, man, that would have been like get a free brick of gold.
And it may happen again, right? So we got a surplus of the toilet paper that's back there for that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that all came from. And then there's only so many sales you can do free toilet paper with a sale. But it's probably been about a year. So maybe next week we'll have a sale where people can get the free roll of toilet paper again, because there is a shit ton, literally a shit ton of toilet paper in the warehouse.
Okay, yeah, I had wondered that, so I'm glad that answered my question.
Oh yeah, so that's what it is. It wasn't like a new business venture that we thought we could be profitable with. It's literally like, how can we save our ass?
Yeah.
Right? So toilet paper kind of was a good pun, for there. So that's kind of what that was.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. That was my 2 questions.
Yeah. No, I want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you for the podcast that you do, all the content that you put out there. This has been a great time. Need to do this again. There's so many topics, so many other things I wanted to go down. So many we didn't even get into compounds, like all the different compounds to go that route. But appreciate your time, appreciate you coming out, and for all you guys that are listening, word on. See, I got an awesome close.
Thank you.
That's it.